The thumbnail's awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Dave.
All right.
What up, guys? We have a David G in the house. Big David G. He's got a big brain. He connects theology with politics, with philosophy, and he just coalesces it together for superpower punch to the brain. And we're hopefully going to tap into some of this. And today, our main point is to kind of talk about politics, which we don't talk very much about on this show. Personally, I have had that experience with politics where it caused a serious amount of hysteria. You know, back when I was 24 and stuff, and just looking in the Alex Jones world of conspiracies, and it will eat you up and spit you out. And so after that, I kind of went through this phase of just like, I don't know what's true. I have no way of distinguishing truth from this. So it's just my preference, and it just depressed me. So I kind of stayed out of politics for a long time. But recently, there's been a lot of voices in our space. Eric Metaxas is probably the loudest in the room right now. David's been about this for a long time. So I'm just saying Eric as far as like really big figures that everybody knows. But they're telling Christians to stop being so passive about what's going on in the government. And Eric particularly is using what happened in Germany as a reference point for us to compare ourselves to wake up. So a lot of stuff going on and a lot of stuff we can learn. Very dense subject, but luckily we have a guide here who's going to help us weed out the wheat from the chaff. So, David, how you doing? Thanks for coming on, man.
I'm doing great. And in light of this topic, I'm happy to announce my endorsement for President Joe Biden for re-election.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
I hope that answers everything you need today. Thank you.
And you're not
Nancy Pelosi. Let's go.
I'm endorsing Nancy Pelosi for the return to the speakership of the House.
Yep. And I'm going to start some
That should
necromancy.
solve
We're going to
everything.
get
all problems solved.
who's that one dead guy who had the island?
Epstein.
Yeah, we're going to raise him back from the dead. Make sure everything.
And you're not suicidal, right, Dave?
Yeah.
David, you're not. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I think he's probably at a tropical island somewhere. Unfortunately, we got to figure out how
Still
he gets
alive.
that nice mask on or something, huh?
Like,
no, I have no
Eric
opinion
Weinstein.
about that.
Yeah, Eric Weinstein. He was on there with. He was on a podcast. I hadn't seen him for a while, but he was talking about how apparently he met Epstein. And he's like, and you know how he talks all like really mystical and weird. Like
He always has these
Eric
awkward
is
long
just-
pauses.
Oh yeah, he's like but he knows what he has his own style. It's such an Eric style. And the guy's like, so what was it like? He's like, he's not a human, he's an entity. And he's like, well, what the hell does that mean? He's like, he's just not human. He wasn't human. And what he was alluding to apparently was that he's basically a demon or a demon possessed. Like he had a negative presence that was so palpable, it was not human. And I was like, oh, if Eric's saying that, dude must have been a real pile of burning dumpster fire. Yeah.
I thought he was saying that he was a cutout for some kind of intelligence group, and he was just playing a role like a character.
Yeah, he was like a created character almost.
He was saying about the gravity that was with him and the darkness and all this and that. I was like, oh, did you watch that interview? Where with Eric?
I didn't see all that, but I saw a clip of it. I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I did
an interview. What's that guy's name who interviewed him? I did an interview with him. It never came out. I don't know if it was something I said salacious.
Yep.
Yeah.
You did one with him. It never came out.
I don't know. I mean, I usually don't. You're not supposed to say that kind of stuff, I guess, in general, to be politically correct. But I talked about good old fashioned mimetic theory with him. I don't know what happened with it, but maybe it'll come out one of these days.
Well, that probably that's a good sign.
I did it years ago. I think like a year and a half ago.
He didn't release the
2 years
Andrew Tate
ago.
interview
Maybe
he
I did it
too. So you're in the league with Andrew Tate. So
yeah,
sucks because if I probably would have seen that and learned about mimetic theory a whole lot sooner than watching you and Uber Boyo go at it, which was
yeah.
It was a great podcast.
Uber Boyo did a good job. Yeah, he did a great job.
Yeah, that dude's smart, man. Anyway,
all those commenters, all those Nietzschean fans in the comment section for his video saying, you need to let him speak. This is not fair. Jesus is for wimps. You need to let him speak more and stop. I'm like, what do you mean?
Dude, he's Nietzschean. I love what you're saying, David. What you're saying is so profound. The way that you put it together, I love this.
Yeah.
He's like, just shut the heck up, But then at the same time, it's like he's Nietzsche and he needs to be the overman.
That's what I'm getting at. I'm like, live your own world, you guys. Why are you whining that somebody talked too much than your favorite guy?
What? It's embarrassing.
But yet you want barbarian, like glory days back. You want to emulate conquistadors, but you're mad that your hero didn't get to talk enough. What the heck, man?
They got to go they got to be raised in a Latin family or go to a Baptist church where you got to fight to talk, bro.
Yeah.
You got. That's why those men are.
You get
macho.
Those dueling words of the Lord that go on for hours, and you can't tell. I think my word of the Lord's not finished yet. How did you get your word of the Lord in the middle of my word of the Lord? This ain't working.
Oh boy,
did you get that? That's not Baptist. That's more Pentecostal.
Yeah, the Lord's talking to everybody at the same time. It's just guys, right? Some people, they're gonna drone out for like, ooh, baby. It's a sensitive point, especially when the meal's getting cold. Yeah.
Speaking of the word of the Lord, Joe Rogan's been talking a lot about Christian stuff on his podcast, and I saw Hulk Hogan had a John 3:16 thing. So Hulk Hogan is coming around, I guess. He's excited to be evangelical. Yeah.
That's kind of something I've been thinking about, seeing all these people sort of like, and I'm happy. I'm happy to see people coming around to fundamentals and Christianity. And it's becoming like the anti-pop culture. It's almost like becoming sort of cool to go down this traditionalist route, be a Christian, talk about the Bible. And I see some celebrities and some people are more, and I'm wondering how many of them are doing it just as like a grift versus how many of them are like actually making a change of heart going on. I don't know. There's rebels out there that just want to be rebellious and they will take on whatever if it's a leather jacket, if it's punk rock, if it's rap, if it's being a Christian, they'll do that just to be contrarian. But on Joe Rogan, that dude, that singer who's super big
George
now, Oliver Anthony. Oliver Anthony.
Yeah. Anthony Oliver Anthony.
Yeah. Those two names combined in some order. He got on there and he read his Bible, which I thought was beautiful. And it's coming from more of like our perspective as a human being, not yours, Dave, because you have a lot of earned knowledge in a specific domain, but just a normal guy, in a lot of ways. And I could see that from Joe Rogan, hearing it from a normal guy. I just saw like, because then he had Steve Meyer on, which was like a heavy hitter. Steve Meyer is like, you're familiar with his book, The Return of the God Hypothesis, Signature in the Cell? Okay. And so like, I'm sure that like put a lot in his head. And then it's funny because he's had all these other guests like Hulk Hogan, this guy, Oliver Anthony. He's got his comedian friend too. Yeah. What's his name? He's got a podcast he did with
Tim
Steven.
Dillon.
Yeah.
He's not a Christian.
No, it's the other guy.
No, not Dylan.
He's like a skinnier dude, bald head. He's really into philosophy.
Tim Pool. You're talking about Tim Pool?
No. He's a comedian. He's an actor. He's got a great show. He's also been talking on Joe Rogan's. He had him on with another couple guys, and they were talking conspiracy theories. And he was like bringing on. He's a Christian. I'm almost positive he's a Christian.
Not Dave.
And then he also had a couple other guys that were on there, and they were also talking about this. One guy was in the Everglades, and he was shooting, or he was trying to kill, I think, Brian Callen. Yes, the Brian Callen. Anyways, this other fellow was totally unrelated, a hunter guy, and he's out in the Everglades, and they find he's going this this place that the county gave him permission to go to, or no one else is supposed to go to, and it's like this old satanic ritual spot that he had heard of. And there's supposed to be a bunch of like snakes or whatever over there. He's going to go kill them. And they were just about to have a ritual over there. And he goes into detail about like how freaky it was and some of the history that was involved. And the guy was very not like Bible thumping on him or anything, but just giving his own experience and what he believes. And I could tell like Joe's starting to have more of these interactions with some of his guests that aren't like with an agenda going, hey, this is the believe in Jesus because I do, but more like personal experiences and sharing it out of the goodness of their hearts. Yeah. And I think it's starting to dude, how flow. Crazy would it be if Joe how crazy would that be if he converted? That would be crazy, man. Like literally he'd probably lose a bunch of his followers, but I think that for a lot of people, like for our nation, God, if you want like a spokesperson to trying to enter into this conversation about politics, right? It's so hard with the church because everybody tends to focus on different things with all of our denominations, and our focuses are always shifting depending on those, our preoccupation in scripture. But if you had like a centering figure like Joe Rogan to kind of help, because he's got the political voice, he's got like this diversification that would allow him to do that. But that's kind of the depressing part about church. And I was going to ask you, like, how did you, so how old are you now? I mean, you're past 30 or whatever.
34. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm 35. Okay. At what point did you start
Not yet.
October 25th, this year I will be. But when you're going through what? October 25th. Oh, it's the same actually. He's 1 minute older than me though. Do you want to get the atomic clock on there?
That turd.
Yeah.
Now, who was holding on who when they were coming out? Was one trying to choke out the other?
We
one
were
like
hugging each other, bro. Yeah, exactly. It was one of those stepbrothers hugs.
Oh my god.
I mean, it was a lot of fun. We got a 100% wrestling partner. But my question to you is, because I was about like, I'd say like 23, 24. I had my father, a couple of the elders, males in our group, and they're like, you guys have to vote. You guys have to take this seriously. This was like the beginning of Obama. And all of our conservative friends were like, we have to make a stand now. Like, this is serious. We have the communist agenda. This is what I remember sort of what them telling me is taking steps forward. And if we don't make a move now, we're going to end up with serious, serious problems. And so from there, we started to try and take our decisions and conversations more seriously about politics. So what was that like for you? And how did you start to take it seriously?
I guess I was interested in politics like around the 2000 election with Al Gore and Bush. So I got interested in it a little bit back then, but I didn't really like understand the system until high school around 2005 or 6, somewhere around there. I started understanding, closer to how things work on some level. And then I was interested in Ron Paul in 2007 and 2008. And I wrote an ad. I did some volunteer work where wrote an ad about why Ron Paul was the Christian choice for the Republicans in 2008. And they turned it in, the Ron Paul campaign took it and mailed it out to like this large list of churches in South Carolina and Iowa to help them with the Christian vote. Didn't do too much at the time, but we were ahead of our time and a lot of the things, because now, like the conservative movement has like normalized like almost all of his platform now on some surface level. They may not believe in it as much as Ron Paul believes in it, but who today in the Republican Party is for the Patriot Act? It's overwhelmingly against surveillance. Who today is not skeptical of the FBI like Ron Paul was? They're overwhelmingly like that. Who today is even rethinking the CIA like he did? Who's against these endless wars? It's now a normal.
I told you so.
Yeah, I mean everything. Literally almost everything, he's pioneered has become like part of the cornerstone. Although it's not translated into policy, they're all a bunch of still, because the average person, just like you're saying, like they just don't have enough time to like practice discernment in their food choices, much less like sift through all the nonsense and lies for the latest gimmick guy who says, I'm going to follow the Constitution and family values, and it's all a fraud. But it's hard. Like people know that, but they still keep voting for the same dummies because they're like, well, that the world is falling apart. I want to tell you that is the wrong way to go. So anybody telling you, and I know it's paradoxical because everybody telling you just do this because the commies are coming, that's the problem, right? That whole dialectic is the problem.
That's what we heard, dude.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what we heard, like on repeat. It was like this fear mongering, like you got to, but it was never clear on what you should do or how you should do it. So it left you feeling very, kind of just pissed off and weak and fearful. It's just the worst place you could feel.
Like there's nothing different though. Like the people that they're well-meaning and they were recognizing perhaps some really big problems, but they had the wrong toolkit and the wrong to address the problem, because voting for McCain or Romney instead of Obama, like, what is the difference? There's no difference between them on anything of substance about the fundamentals of like what is running the world today. Like, none of those people would ever like return marriage to the church and allow the church to determine the terms of a marriage contract, which would go to the very heart of everything declining in our culture today, because we handed over a sacred right that has existed prior to the United States existence. And we've said, hey, United States government, we can't figure out how to do marriage. So you set the terms, a one size fits all policy, depending on the state you're in, that normalizes eventually all the worst types of egregious desecration of the covenant of marriage. And then children have been born in that environment of chaos for generations now. And therefore we get the results we have today. It's not that hard. I just mentioned one policy thing. If you got all the BS out and you had people run on that one policy thing and to start state by state, and each state abolish government marriage monopoly and allow church institutions to set the terms of the marriage covenant, so that if you went to a conservative denomination and you and your wife wanted to get married there, you read the covenant terms and it says you can't leave on any notice based on, accusation. You can't just leave for no fault. You can't just leave for some meme you saw on a Facebook group or something, right? You have to actually like have terms of agreement that the church abides by because of their faith and what they believe in, and they're held up by that, so that any court dispute would be looking at the terms of the contract as it was designed by your church institution and you guys voluntarily going into it, and would say, look, the terms say you can't shred these kids' lives because you want to follow your bliss.
That sounds a lot love thing.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like the Romans. When the Romans had to defer to the Jews and their priests when they were dealing with an issue, like, this isn't for us to deal with. You guys handle your own stuff. You have your own law. You guys deal with it, and it helped the culture.
Have we had that here? You said like that's changed here. Have we had it in that way you've described it?
I'm not an expert on the law history of this, but I think in some ways we did, right? Because in some ways you used to, when you got married, you would sign the opening of the front of your Bible, where it says sign your names. It's a marriage covenant. You would sign your names on your Bible as your covenant agreement. That was your contract, right? And so they didn't have this concept of a marriage license. Marriage license came about later on, I think around the time they were trying to police interracial marriages. So that's what happens. The church falls prey to an idol, like some kind of racialism issue, right? And they go to daddy government to say, hey, stop people from having interracial marriage. So we'll give you guys the power of license so we can hang this over, this issue. And then guess what? It comes to bite them in the butt, because eventually when you give government the marriage license power, what do? They legalize no-fault divorce. They legalize, gay marriage, every other thing. And it's just chaos, right? So one issue alone could strike at the heart. If you had a powerful, charismatic leader or movement or all of the above, really focus on taking out that one thing, you would start to really take apart the foundation of the chaos situation that we're in today. Because children have no protection. Children don't have any protection.
They like to act like they do. They like to act like they do. And it's always under that guise of you're uneducated. We could do your job better than you, which is what big government will do. But I like that perspective a lot, because, the voting, what you described was exactly what Joe and I were dealing with when we first became aware that we had sort of a voice, and that voice, we had to be responsible for that voice. And that took doing some research, understanding, the dynamics, political dynamics that we were largely just didn't give two craps about it all. And obviously after a while, you read some articles, you realize that everybody has sort of a spin and a hot take, and the people themselves are like very, very inclined and have an appetite for just it's like a fight. It's like an ongoing fight, and people betting on the sides. And it's like you said, it becomes sort of a god. They begin to idolize just the back and forth of it all.
It's a team sport.
Yeah, it's like a team sport.
It's
exactly.
Like, do you even really like when you got into it, feel like you had a choice though? Because it's like, your parents are probably telling you like, You gotta
Right.
vote on the team.
Like
there's
that's
no other
where your
option.
vote's going, but maybe check this guy out.
You
a
could
little.
go check some of the other stuff, but it's like you got to be on the team. Otherwise, your vote's canceling out some idiot on the other team.
Yeah,
It's like you need your rival to exist, because like when Jesus cured the guy who was possessed by the demons in the city of the Gerasenes, which was the pagan town on the northern shore of Galilee. It was the only pagan town that Jesus was ever recorded interacting with at the time of his ministry. And the guy, his name is Legion, and he's self-stoning himself. He's hitting himself with rocks, cutting himself by the tombstones of the city. And when Jesus cast the legion of demons into a herd of pigs, the pigs fly off the cliff and drown themselves in a state of chaos. The sea, by the way, it's the Sea of Galilee, is a symbol of chaos, right? So remember that. And Legion is going back into the world of chaos. Legion was the symbol of the Roman imperial might. So it's a political story too. And it's talking about the possession of this person by the spirit of Legion is the spirit of empire. And what the spirit of empire does is it needs a scapegoat to function. And so in that town, they were all happy as long as that guy was the nutcase that they could all collectively measure themselves by indifference to. So just like I think it was a lady named Kristen de Montfort. She has a blog where she talks about how the Grinch who stole Christmas, that's a scapegoat murder story, right? At the end of the story, the Who's all gather together and they have a big turkey. Well, it's an insinuation they were eating him, but they didn't. I mean, they don't say it that way, but that's really what's going on, because they blame everything is on the Grinch. He did it all. He did it all. He did it all. And he just needs to be fixed. And then our city will be fine. That is like a cartoon child resolution version of how people function in politics and culture. So the liberal narcissist needs the Trump boogeyman in his head and on his Twitter and on his TikTok to feel virtuous by contrast. And the conservative needs his or her, villain to feel right and good and whole by contrast, right? I don't have everything settled in my life, but at least I'm not that purple-haired, non-gendered person. Or I don't have my situation fixed the way I want, but at least I'm not that racist, horrible guy who can't understand that Black Lives Matter too. So this is how these people function. They can't live without having that collective measuring rod of that enemy other, that their tribe finds unity in being not that person. And the moment that they lose that hatred, their tribe will start to fracture, right? Because the moment you don't have it's like a magnet, right? You put a magnet and it puts all the lead filings all in alignment, and it like organizes it, right? And as long as you have that magnet that they're all attracted to, that scapegoat, that demoniac, that Grinch, as long as they have that, it kind of organizes and it allows them to forget each other's personal rivalries. But once that's dissolved, it's hell on earth for everybody, because now they're going to be more fighting over, well, I'm a Native American. And another one says, well, I'm a person of a slave descent, and I'm a dwarf. I am, LGBTQ. And it's like you're fighting like Pokemon cards. I throw this, I choose you, I choose this victim power, and you're all fighting.
Victim Olympics.
Yeah, victim Olympics. And that is not something that can ever create cohesion as long as you can't collectively hate the other. So the way Christians have to beat it is to stop playing into that. Stop giving them that hate back, because that's what fuels the system, right? And it's the same way on a cultural level. It's the same way as it is politically. So a lot of these new right figures you see that are adjacent, some of them, to things you see in the red pill community or whatever, but some of them also don't like that. But they're always talking about, and even Christians are saying, we need to be strong politics. We need to get rid of liberalism, what they call it, and go towards authoritarian Caesar. We need a right-wing Caesar to fix this. Like, we need someone who the left thinks Trump was, but they actually think Trump was too soft, right? Mm-hmm. and we need a real strong like embodiment of the fears of the left, a strong Caesar-like right-wing Christian guy who will come in and dismantle the executive branch through sheer grit and willpower and charisma and unite the country away from all the petty squabbles. I think that's a delusional thing. I don't think that will work.
Absolutely.
I don't think that's Christian. I understand why people feel that way, but I don't think that is the answer. But that's what, that's what people. So as long as the leftist folks who are going towards tyranny their way, as long as they see that their opponents are saying, you wait till we get power, we're going to bring our Caesar to fix you by force, that justifies for them to continue grabbing for more authoritarian power while they still have it. And so what does that do in the middle? The folks in the middle, the moderates, the centrists, the people who are casuals, who are not paying attention to politics that much, but they kind of pay attention every 4 years for the president.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What happens for them, which is where culture shifts. It's that herd in the middle, right? You got the crazies on both sides, right? Who are just true believers, they're true believers. Then most of the people in the middle are just kind of, they'll go along with whatever seems most charismatic and cool and safe. So they will settle for the tyrants that are currently running the show, which is the uniparty liberal hegemonic establishment. They'll settle for that rather than go with what is this new right-wing power.
Can you explain that really quick? Because you're blowing out these terms and they're heavy hitters. So the hegemonic Unitarian, that's like the government above the two players, right? Is that for the listeners? Well, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, it's the hedge. When I say hegemonic, what I'm saying is the system in place of the mindset that runs the media, the banks, the culture, the entertainment system, the two political parties.
Right.
All
so
that money around the lobby world, they're all on the same boat. None of them want to get rid of the Federal Reserve. The public wants to get rid of the Federal Reserve when they know about it. Most of them don't understand it. They all want it. They want the wars. The public doesn't want the wars. They are the uniparty. They're the hegemonic system that is in play. Hegemonic simply meaning they are entrenched beyond your ability to shift as an individual.
That's right. Right, left, doesn't matter.
And they hate each other individually. They'll kill each other. It's like the mafia. There was a saying, somebody said, I wish I remember the name, so I give them credit, but he said something about the Democrats and the Republicans are like the mafia, the Genoveses and the, whatever, and they're fighting, but the moment you come in to disturb their game, they're going to unite with their guns pointed at you. Like, who the hell do you think you are? So that's exactly what the uniparty system is. That system can't keep doing its tyranny unless it's anti-establishment dissidents, who typically are conservatives, if they don't stop mimicking them. If the conservative Christians would learn to say, turn the other cheek, we're not going to do it that way. We're not going to get revenge on you. We're not going to arrest all of you people because you've arrested all of us. If we would actually have that worldview and live that out confidently and joyfully, the people in the middle who are where culture changes would move towards that anti-establishment as the new fresh perspective, because it's different. It's fresh. It's freedom and it's gospel. And that's what we all hunger for, is freedom, if we feel that we can safely get it. And so what I'm saying is the people in the middle who are persuadable one way or the other, they will stick with the conversation, maintaining the hegemony that we have, as long as the opposition keeps saying, wait, we're going to get you back. Does that make sense? If the
it's like the mimetic rivalry. It's the negative mimetic response to. It's not always the one that's copying. It's the negative mimetic response, the mimetic rivalry, and those things coalescing into perpetual conflict, right? And the addiction to that conflict. It's like, my dad's stronger than your dad, and then we start making up stories, right? So this is largely the atmosphere. What you described so poignantly was the atmosphere we came from. So this is like, our churches were very adamant about saying, hey, this is a serious issue, communism, our nation, freedoms, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And so Joe and I kind of took a back seat to that. We're like, I'm going to read books and kind of worship and do my own thing. But as far as reading news articles every day and trying to say who's right and who's wrong, I don't know about all that. And so lately, Eric Metaxas I guess he's an Episcopalian. So it's like, it's funny how we as believers, depending on, that's kind of why I opened the conversation, depending on your domain, we're going to think of the church in that schizophrenic way where it's like, this is the church. It's like, really, it's just a little piece of the pie. And I wish there was some kind of like data thing to really collect all this so we could see where the margins truly are, because we're just coming from where we're coming from. And somebody like Eric Metaxas is coming from his Episcopalian, background where nobody's political. And they're like very spineless when it comes to, they're like, you can't make your, you can't make your religion you can't politicize your religion. And they're sort of hiding behind this so that this passivity is overcoming them in terms of recognizing the dangers we're in. So he brings up Dietrich Bonhoeffer and all this other stuff. So my question to you is, so here's what I'm thinking about here. We should, as a church, be operating in the Christ incarnation, right? So we should be fighting the right battles, fighting to take marriage back, for example, fighting for our children to be taught correctly. They need to be taken care of and protected, right? They need to come first beyond having the new car in the driveway or buying them new clothes. Any of this, the American dream is not the church dream. So we need to correct that. Yeah. Now, when we're in this stage, like, and this is why I'm asking you this, because Joe and I and Mike, I'm ignorant to this political thing, but it feels like it's a 2.0 of what I was going through when Obama was coming on, where it's like, we are standing on the precipice of hell and we need to do something like a year ago and things are really bad. The church needs to stop being so passive. The Nazi regime is coming back in another way, right? But it's coming back, and we're gonna be, it's too late. This is the reel that's being played. And so we're trying to balance all this out, because I mean, there's always gonna be some guy in the room saying that, another guy in the room saying no, and so what do you think's going on in terms of the severity of where we stand, as a church right here and now?
So I think we should be engaged, but it looks differently than what the people who typically say to get engaged in politics say.
But how bad is it? That's a question I want you to answer. Like,
about how bad is what?
People are talking about.
How bad are we going off the cliff?
The precipice. Yeah, cliff. Hell underneath. We're all going to have no freedom. There's going to be another COVID coming in 2 months, and then they're going to come down and, martial law, whatever. Like it's
lockdown, civil war. What's going to happen? People are talking some crazy stuff right now. And I mean, what do you think?
How bad it will be depending on whether we can muster enough good leadership in this time of difficulty, because that makes the whole world a difference. If your child is having a health crisis and the parents are freaking out and going crazy and hyperventilating and screaming, "Oh my God, you're going to die," and freaking out, you know what I mean? Then you're not setting leadership, and you're going to make that problem worse. And maybe the child could die because of your negligence of not being able to control yourself. But if you're a leader and in that moment, you can find that centering point of Zen peace, right? And the joy of the Lord is my strength. And you can be a leader, and you can, all right, we got to do this, we got to do that to protect the wound, we got to do this to hold the neck, you know what I mean? Whatever the issue is that you're stopping a health crisis for your child, that's the leadership that makes the difference in the crisis to help you transition in a good way. So that's what we need. Depending on how bad it will be would depend on whether people who want to follow Christ step up and are able to lead people mimetically as role models to chill, relax, soberly, repent of blind spots and model that out, and then chart a better course with confidence and patience and stillness, rather than freaking out and reacting, right? When you freak out and react, as things start to get challenging, they get worse, right? And that's kind of the thing. That's so hard to do. I'm not an expert on that by any means, but that's obviously the vision we need to have, because it will be hard. We are not going to have our dollar supremacy anymore because of what happened with this Ukraine war. They weaponized the dollar against Russia with all the sanctions. It blew up in their face. Russia's doing better than they were before. They're making alliances, and Saudi Arabia is joining the BRICS group, which is like an alternative basket of countries that want to create a currency that could be outside of the dollar, that includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, and they're bringing in Saudi Arabia now, which used to be our golden boy in terms of our oil and our dollar connection. And now Saudi Arabia said we've had enough, and Russia, they're all uniting. So it's backfiring, right? And so in that adjustment, it's going to be difficult. There's no doubt about it. But it doesn't have to be that difficult. Like we really can't. It's about, I know it sounds so, people don't believe this anymore, but really it's about your mindset. If you believe we can achieve great things and we set a plan to it and we work together to get that information and develop the solutions, we can instill confidence in people so that people don't freak out. And though they may not be as rich as they are used to in America, they might be able to actually have more joy. They might be able to have more stability in their families, and they might be able to have more wealth in real terms rather than in the bank account terms. You know what I'm saying? Like if you don't have, like, let's say we become a poor nation as in general compared to what we've ever experienced in the last 70 years. But we don't have the same diseases that we've had for the last 70 years. What if we start seeing diabetes drop, cancer drop? Schizophrenia
what it
drops.
takes sometimes. Maybe it's a poor nation that's going to take that kind of, change. I love what you're saying.
Would you rather be wealthy? Would you rather be a millionaire and a billionaire with diabetes and schizophrenia and Alzheimer's, or would you rather be very meagerly waged, but you don't have any of those afflictions in your old age?
Yeah,
exactly.
We're not being wise stewards with what we've been given.
So
what you're saying is like stay away from hysteria, the attraction of hysteria. And sort of like
that's like an addiction, though.
It's an addiction.
That's what I was thinking. Like
drama.
We have to get people pulled away. Like people are addicted to the hysteria, so they have to like want to leave that behind. I think they love the outrage. They love seeing their favorite commentator like Ben Shapiro or whatever, like just rail on the current administration.
He's their voice. Yeah,
he's their voice. It's you got to somehow unprogram people from wanting that.
That's like it reminds me of the question that real quick here, Joe. I'm sorry. Reminds me of the same. What David said, like if I was to meet a younger me, remember our last question, what would I teach him? I'd teach him, I'd delve into the mimetic theory, right? Because then you can recognize when you're being mimetically triggered by hysteria or like have these burgeoning appetites that are just toxic and poisonous, and you'd be able to unplug from them because when it's went so far, it's like a psychosis, and then it actually becomes a part of who you are. And unplugging from that matrix is hardcore. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say, Joe. I know you've been trying to say something. No, I just was gonna agree with you. I think the main pathogen that we all feed upon is a drama, a attraction to hysteria, and this need to be validated, because people aren't being validated within their own lives. They're not leading their own families. They're not having those challenges, which when they go to bed, they'll feel validated in their purpose as living in the image of God. They're actually, and this is kind of what I want to go into within this. It's a war between good and evil, and we're co-creating and bringing heaven down to earth. And then there's another bunch of people and the devil bringing down hell onto earth. And it takes on all these different forms and within the body of Christ, and how we work together in accomplishing this co-creation of heaven on earth, bringing the Christ, the metaphysical divine, into the physical realm. And we get derailed with these sitcoms, that take over and validate us with the tyrant figures that we so want to embody, because we're not doing it in our own lives as Christians, or we're going after this one pastor who's very vocal or not vocal at all. Yeah. It's this polarization within it. Like you said, walking down the middle lane doesn't get the credit it's supposed to. If you look at like King Arthur, like some of these, even Jocko Willink, he talks about what the decision making it takes to be a soldier. Leader. And he says, keep a small world. He's not thinking too far ahead. He's like thinking about what's in front of him, this step and the next step. And it might be something very trivial, but if he was to take everything at once, his mind would be blown. He'd be running around with a chicken with his head cut off. So I want to kind of shift the perspective here, since the four of us seem like we kind of come from a similar background in terms of the people we're around, the believers we're around, the way that they interacted with politics and so on and so forth. So, and you described the sort of scapegoating and how that works, and that caustic, programming that ends up happening. Now, to switch it to say Eric Metaxas' background and his section of Christianity, if you will, the passives, how is that psychology working out? If we were to apply Rene Girard's theory on that, so that, because keep in mind, our listeners are going to be split. There's going to be this overly political, just jizzing and orgasming in political despair all the time. And then you're going to have the other guys who are just like, I'm staying out of it completely. So let's talk about those guys. What's their thing? How does that work out?
It's the same thing, I mean, both of them are not doing anything to move the boat forward. It's like you're charting a boat and you don't have any sails on it. You don't have any oars. You don't know how to use your oars. You don't have to do anything. You don't know how to paddle, and you're all just sitting in a boat stagnant, and you're not moving, and you're just kind of drifting along on the ocean. You can't even get going. That's where we're at as a society. We don't have a compass, so we don't know which way we're going. We don't have a map, so don't have a vision about where we're going. And we don't have the means and the discipline to organize efficient means to move that boat in a way as a team so that we're working together for win-win solutions to get to our destination. We're stuck sitting there aimlessly stagnant, floating up and down on the sea we started at, and we don't know what we're doing. And while we're in that context, you can imagine that folks sitting in that boat for day after day, when food's getting scarce and you're not getting anywhere, you're going to start not liking each other. You're going to start fighting, and you're going to start talking about all the problems that annoy each other and all your suspicions of one another. And it can be very addictive. It can be very addictive for people to be caught up in that fighting. So what you have to do is you got to have a chart. You got to have a map. You got to know, you have a vision of where we can go. You got to believe in that map. You got to have a compass and other means of how you know where you're at. Then you have to have the actual technology. You got to learn how to move a paddle or put up sails, or figure out how to get a motor attached to your boat and start zipping down where you need to go to get on your journey. And our country right now doesn't have a vision. We don't believe in anything anymore. When I tell you right now, we can cure cancer, the answer is going to be, well, that has been already known. Duh. And it's just been suppressed because the government doesn't want to break the backs of big pharma. Or the answer is, yeah, we just need to give $100 billion more to government and researchers, and one day they'll come up with an expensive cure for cancer. Either option is BS. It's learned helplessness on both sides. Both the people who believe in the system as the establishment has it, and those who are against the establishment as it is, and they want to say that it's a conspiracy, will never have the cure for cancer. Both of those solutions get us nowhere. It's skin in the game, it's a vision, it's believing it can be done, and then it's looking meticulously at the facts so that you can then explain to the public and develop a service and a means of distributing this technology or product or drug or dietary correction that can alleviate cancer in America. You have to have that kind of, I use those examples because health issues affect all of us to one degree or another. We all know people who suffer. We all know people who may be going to have a disease down the road that would be debilitating to their mind, health, body, and soul. And we all know that those are things that we can wrap our minds around and work together to try to make sure we can eradicate. But you have to first believe that you can eradicate it without having expensive drugs that nobody can afford. Maybe we can have inexpensive drugs that we can find right under our noses, maybe drugs that we already know about. Maybe we can find things like dietary corrections that will alleviate diseases for the future generations and start acting them out now. But what I'm saying is we have to have a big vision, bold belief that we can, through our innovations and our working together, come up with things without politics. Because when you come up with solutions that are outside of politics, then you realize that politics doesn't have to be the end all be all. And then when you engage in politics, it's almost an afterthought rather than your forethought. It's not your biggest thought. It's just a side thing. Does that make sense? So politics needs to be put in the rearview mirror. It's like this. You're having lunchroom drama. That's what you're talking about. We're all having lunchroom drama. Some people are saying we should be engaged in the politics. Other people are at the other table saying we're too cool for politics. We know it's BS. We're not playing the game. It's still lunchroom drama. Nothing's getting done. Someone's got to produce the food. Somebody's got to make things happen. You can't just sit endlessly in a eternal lunchroom fighting over who's sitting at which table and who looked at who wrong and who's looking at whose girlfriend. You know, that's lunchroom drama. It's endless BS.
Right. And I love, so great. What you're saying is great. And somebody might say, okay, well, here we are with this drama that's going on, but what about when they're starting to take your rights away, maybe freedom of speech? They want to control your bank accounts, and they want to put a ESG score on your business. Say if you're a bigger business guy, and
or like this comment,
you're striking out. Right, Obama paved the way for this kind of stuff, and it's like it just keeps compounding. Like year after year, they take more, and then you have this drama that's starting, and then it becomes more and more heated. And then it gets to a point to where either you're going to have to take some sacrificial measures or some violent measures. And we're approaching this point to where the opposition, when you think about like Larry Fink, you know, or State Street and BlackRock and the power of these organizations. And I mean, there's always been powerful figures throughout history, whether it was the Catholic Church, whether it was the Roman Empire, whether it was the British Empire, whether it was the Egyptians. There's always been some major power force. There's always going to be this scale that most of the value of the world goes to a small few, the Pareto effect, right? However, the surveillance and the control that they have, I don't think it's ever been at this state. So it gives you the fight or flight that I think is very powerful for a lot of people. So how do us as Christians deal or find solutions when you're in this fight or flight that aren't violent, that maybe how do you navigate that, David?
Well, for example, like if you find someone who is truly principled and truly is going to be an effective statesman, governor, or senator or whatever, who will actually fight against all those things literally and not just do lip service to it, then fine, vote for them. That's fine. Do your thing, you know, support them, whatever you want to do. I'm not against that. I think it has its place. But what I'm saying is, like, you're looking at politics as the primary means of protecting yourself from this like inevitable march to tyranny. But it shouldn't be the main thing. It should be a side effect of a cultural thing, you know, like it should be a downstream effect of a cultural renaissance, an attitudinal change that we are reverberating across our culture. And when we do it that way, what we're doing right now, okay? Like if we were doing this, like if we could have these conversations, you know, and more people start to bring this into the mainstream consciousness, like you said, if Rogan got on board with this stuff, you know, like if we can make this stuff stick, it's going to open up a different paradigm of like, okay, where's the action at? You know, the action's not with these 80-year-olds who promise us nothing but lock us down and give us garbage medicine and food and help out their crooks around the world and payoffs and stuff like that. I mean, come on. But you can't expect like all the best like changes for that to happen through a voting process. That'll be kind of a delayed effect. It's not going to happen overnight. So you just got to let that go and roll up your sleeves and say, all right, you know, we're going to do all. It doesn't mean you don't. It's just like a side thing.
Right. I mean, people need to hear that.
Thing, you know?
Yeah. You need to say it. I think Eric Metaxas was being questioned on the agency within being a political activist on the basis of your faith. Like, what does that mean? How does that look at? Like, let's break that down. So central, like if you're to put a hierarchy 1 to 10, you know, first is the incarnation of Christ, right? Actually developing a family life that represents what the Bible says you should be doing. That is top priority. And down, like you said, it's the downstream effect of that is going to, like, in 10 years, once these kids start teaching the other kids, and then those kids, because you're not going to teach the kids that are not your kids. Like it's all a synergy. It's a synergistic, systemic thing that takes time. And that's what Eric was talking about. He's like, we're way behind that change, like, as far as like, and we don't. It's not that we don't believe in miracles and God can change the heart of a nation. I do, but so he's like, okay, do that. Then you got to talk about it. You got to talk about it enough to where people are hearing it, and so that it's almost like you're sending a message
through the Coke can with the.
It's like a bottom up instead of a top
and so
down.
the people from the top are like, okay, there's enough of these people out there saying things in a nonviolent way, right? They're operating in love, but you're doing your part at that point because you're distributing the wealth of the pushback, the actual numbers, of the voices combined into the chorus of pushback is being heard. And so that's where, and then he went on to say, more specific things within basically, there's a time for fear mongering, right? I mean, not fear mongering in the way that people who make money off of it, but like if your house is burning down and you walk into your son's room and you're like, hey buddy, our house is burning down, you need to leave, we need to get up, I don't want to hear about it being late, like we need to move, though there's not time for these long explanations. This is a time of serious jeopardy and we have to make a move. And so I hear these voices kind of saying that more often now. Is it merited or is it not? Like I kind of agree with Joe. I mean, I do agree with Joe. I see a sort of coalescing of factors, and it's always going to be that way for every generation, unless you're in the dark ages where it's like, well, we used to have running water, now we're pooping in holes again, and what the hell is that? But it's like we're at this, new ability to communicate. Everybody's more able now to be conditioned. Like the power of conditioning that they have over people has never been more. They're all addicted to social media. There's so many of these things you can peg on to build this sort of like, is our house burning down scenario? And then if you're,
is it more or less?
Is it more or less? I don't know.
Well,
but
people are choosing.
It's not, because I want to support David in saying that the most important thing, whether the house is burning and you're dying in it or not, is that you operate putting Christ first in your house with the small things, the things that are very, very important that people have been neglecting for the past, 70 years, 60 years. That's been taking a backseat. That's why we're at where we're at now.
And when I say culture, I'm not just talking about your microcosm of your family and stuff, but also like culture in the broader sense of like making good movies, making good programs, making good songs, right? Like that guy, you saw how it was interesting. I said on my show a while back, I said on a podcast with a friend, I said, our culture will change if we can have men who sing like Elvis Presley come up and sing good music and be role models for maybe they have a political or cultural vision that comes along with that. Now, does Oliver Anthony, you don't want to take it literal. I'm not saying, he's singing like Elvis, but you saw when he sang this soulful song in a masculine kind of way, it hit a nerve like everybody, like a record scratch, like, whoa, what's going on? And then all these people who are not political, liberals and Democrats, black Democrats and stuff who were watching this were like, I resonate with this man. This man's making me tear up or something. That shut the whole BS down. Everybody was one because music and art and culture is way more powerful than the head, right?
I like
Politics.
that,
and so that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what I'm trying to say about like, it's not just about, I'm not saying just go, get your life in order and wait it out. I'm saying do that. But also if you're artistic, help, if you're not, that's okay. If you want to help fund it on a Kickstarter, go find that guy who's the next filmmaker that nobody knows about on a GoFundMe or whatever, and give him support or elevate him on your show, or, like good move. Cause that's how like the current power establishment, which leans left, got the culture power it has, right? Because it's been doing movies and stuff like this for decades and decades and decades and decades and decades. So this was not, you can't just like snap your finger, and a culture that has been generationally snowballing with all of the results of decades of movies and music lyrics, programming your mind to be a certain way. You can't just go in there overnight and be like, man, are we supposed to engage in politics? And then you're like, well, why is it not working? Well, it's like people have been catechized.
Yep.
I like that. The Daily
catechized in
Wire.
our culture. We've been catechized in our culture for generations to not to think about things in a certain way, and it doesn't change overnight.
That's right.
Why is Princess Peach saving Mario? in the new Mario movie. You know, it's not supposed to be that, you know, but that took generations to get there, you know?
Yeah, what was it? The latest movie, the Disney one, where the ladies, the actress is like, I don't even know if he's gonna make it in the movie. Honestly, he's a creeper stock. I'm just like, God Almighty, this is just bizarre.
But it's not. But the answer to that isn't to make like ghetto conservative movies that are only on Daily Wire or something. I'm sorry. It's to get in. It's get into the world where people are at, and like, you know, because you know, making good
like
movies,
The Sound of Freedom, bro.
Art.
Like that movie. I mean, when I watched that movie, I'll tell you,
Well, they're very polarizing movie like that. I mean, like they're strong. It's also hitting the nerve of these guys wanting to be violent and kick people's asses and murder. Yeah, like there's
Tim
that
Ballard?
bit. Yeah, that's what it does feed a bit of that. I can see. I mean, I love Tim Ballard. He's a complete badass. But like the idea that like 99% of people are going to be able to even get on board with like what he's doing in their life and identify something real in their life to get on board with is very, very small. It's
no,
like,
what it does with it. Okay, so there's that, Joe, for men maybe, but what I feel like that movie really did was it showed, like at the end, it shows the stats of how quickly the child sex trafficking is growing, and it's like just a small. It's already above the illegal arms dealing. It's only like just below the drugs, and how far it's grown, how much it's grown. So for a person, an average person, maybe not a believer, you know, they watch that and they're like, God, this world's a hell of a lot more evil. Like the thought that they get is the world that they see when they walk out and get their mail is way, way more evil. Like the evil stuff that's in the world that they hold in the dark really is in the dark. Like you're not going to see it. You don't know how many of these guys in your neighborhood are, you know, watching child porn. Like you don't know how bad it truly is.
And those stories are needed because like I went to one of these child trafficking nonprofits that deals with that, and they talked at their donor dinner about people don't respond to data and just facts on like these numbers, this many children.
Well, that's
like,
why they put it at the end of the movie,
exactly.
bro.
You need this story like this movie to really grab people's hearts,
because they had a relationship with the girl that was saved at the end, her brother Tim. You know, you're exactly right. That's why the art is what carries the message into the heart.
And that's you know one thing Glenn always is said is like the church needs to be influencing culture, whereas right now I'd say the culture is influencing our churches for the negative.
Yeah,
for sure.
60 years, 70 years. The only reason why I'm bringing this up is because that's fascinating. The same way, like it's like Batman. All right, it's just like Batman. But what I want to see more, like I feel like the church body is, we focus too much. Like if you were to create the body of Christ visually over what attention we give to each part of the body, it'd have like a blown out, it'd look like a Hollywood act. It'd have like a blown out face with this,
it's a homunculus,
you know, giant boobs, and like it'd be like, okay, we're not focusing on like if this body is actually working up to a proper body form. Like we are giving a lot of credit, like attention to mouthpieces, to pastors, you know, to these Batman figures, to like these earth shakers, when it's like there's a lot of other, like you were talking about earlier on, getting guys that are parts of the church of the body of Christ, which is why I like the Catholics, because they have like saints they embody a part of the church, and they say this guy was a saint because he did this. Like this woman we just talked with our previous guest, one of the saints she was talking about, she has stage 4 cancer, breast cancer, and there's a saint that she was talking about that got sold into slavery. Her breast got cut off and put into a brothel, and she remained, you know, a faithful servant of Christ throughout the whole thing. And it's like, what did she do? Like she lived a Christ-like life through insane persecution, right? Exactly. So I think they give credit in the Catholic Church, whereas the Protestants, we don't do that as much.
It's because we traded the church dream for the American dream, you know. The reason why I bring up and I'm trying to support David's idea of the art being the real vehicle to, not because we all know how it feels to be convinced of something in our head, but it doesn't mean anything unless the heart has been changed. Like when you read that verse about a little bit of faith will move a mountain, we like to say in the Iron Disciples, it's like you could move a mountain with dynamite, but to move somebody's heart, that's impossible unless you really reach it and have the Christ key to go open it up. That's why it's like you can move a mountain with a little bit of faith. You can change your heart that way, God through grace. And so the art is something that we have been gifted, right? It's the way we create. The most beautiful things that transcend all of the generations are the art stuff. You know, I mean, like that's what we, and you can tell that there was a time where humans had more of that. Like when you look at an old Singer sewing machine, you know, that thing was beautiful. It was meant to accomplish a job too. Same thing with the old firearms. You can see it in many different places. And now we have this sort of I liked what you said in a podcast before, and I don't know if you was talking to Uber Boyo or it was another guy, but you talk about the urbanization, right? And when you have people collected into such dense numbers that they get so sort of anxious with the sameness that they start to differentiate, and it gets more and more absurd, and then they start to crank out more and more crap, and this becomes crappier and crappier, and there's nothing really beautiful being made in the form of art, nothing really salient being made in the form of art, nothing transcendent for our damn species in the form of art. And if you look historically, the Christians, I mean, not just Christians, I use that term very roughly, but the way that they gave to God was the way that they gave to humanity, right? Like Bach, every single one of his compositions at the end, he dedicated to God. So we know that was in his mind as he was making these things. The same thing is true for a lot of these different quantum leaps we've had in our progression, the positive ones, technology that actually benefited humanity in the form of unity, positive unity. So I wanted to support that because there's a lot of young guys out there who they might have the parent who's like, you need to go and learn how to handle money. And yeah, that's good. But we were put here, and it might be humble. Maybe you're the guy who grows the best carrots around, you know, and you bring them to the farmer's market and they're just the tastiest things. That's the kind of art that I think you're talking about, Dave. It's not always just like writing hit songs or something like that. The American Dream version, it's the beauty of the way God made diversity in this world, and he loves every little part that way. That's how he loves like you look at a coral reef, how many different fish are in there? They're all beautiful. Is there a real reason that they're all colorful and gorgeous and beautiful, and there's hundreds of thousands of these? You know, he likes diversification in the way that we produce our art. And so I think that very much was America's sort of what we had to offer the world. We were progressing, you know, showing people that we could do that, and we've lost sight of that.
Because we make space for people who think differently, and we're going to lose it if we don't fight for that culture. So that's what I'm trying to say is like, like everything and let's go back to the fundamentals. Let's get into mimetic theory, and I'll try to apply that for our time, because that's what you wanted to see.
Yeah.
And that's what helps us. So like the reason why the leftist culture is so powerful is because it more effectively imitates the Christian aesthetic than the conservatives do. So conservatives have, and if you need me to flesh any of these out, just tell me. But like conservatives have more of the metaphysics, like I believe in God, right? But the leftist is the one that shows the vulnerable person left to hang. So which one viscerally at your core heart rips you open for the love of the vindication of the slain lamb? The one who says, I believe in God, and this doctrine is correct, versus the one who reveals and rips open your heart for God's compassion for the vulnerable victim, right? The liberals have been playing that game way better, because conservatives are more like, I believe in God, back to blue. And all right, that's not God's message, okay? I mean, God has a place for everybody. Yes, let's not scapegoat the police. That is one tiny part of it. But if that's your main card, you know what I'm saying? If that's your kind of style when it comes to your culture contribution is like, I like things the way they are. Okay, well, that's not Jesus. Jesus didn't like things the way they are. That's why he changed the world, right? And we are his body, so we should have that same progressive spirit, that visions, that we can have visions, right? That prophecy, we can have
we
visions.
Should be having visions. We should be. That's the church's job, is to initiate
the church,
bring that metaphysical down. Divine.
And the church and political people should be talking about, where's our engineers? You should be hearing, maybe not on Sunday morning. It should be on Sunday morning, in my opinion. But if you can't do Sunday morning, it should be Sunday night service or Wednesday service. Your church should be talking about, we need engineers to create anti-gravity. You say, well, that's not possible. Well, you're not talking like a Christian. You're talking, why can't you go to your hipster pastor? And he says, guys, those hipster pastors with their coffee and their tight, pants. And they say, today, I want you to take out your friendship card and I want you to write down 5 ways we can help this crazy engineer we found on the side of the road who's got an idea for anti-gravity. That's the kind of church I want to go to. You know what I mean? That's the kind, if we're going to have that kind of secret sense, we should be thinking about how do we get Crazy Bill the materials he needs to build his latest engineering design. He thinks he's got a way. That's Christianity, because the pagan culture doesn't make a space for someone who's a disruptive, weird guy. They kill those guys or they turn them into the Grinch. It's the Christians who say, that Grinch guy, he's crazy on some things, but that dude has a solution. Have you seen what he said? That if we try this little thing and try that thing, we can have a magnifying glass. Oh, that's pretty cool. We should have a magnifying glass. We could do a lot of things with that. You know what I'm saying? That weird guy that's different, who's a little bit cranky,
like Tesla,
he actually has a place in our society. We see love. We can turn this into a beautiful masterpiece. But that's not what we have. Like you said, I like that analogy you made, that our Christian body is like this giant head, and nothing else. The engineer could be your spleen. The engineer could be your bone. You know what I mean? The chemist. Why aren't pastors talking about chemists? Because they think that the church has nothing to say about the world. That's bullcrap. That's bullcrap. Jesus said, "You will do greater things than he." Did Jesus show up in Bethlehem on an anti-gravity hoverboard? No, but we can do that with his power, with his Holy Spirit. We can do that in the name of Jesus. We can do that. But you have to believe it, and then you have to rethink your textbook knowledge that, physics says you can't do that. The only people that have anti-gravity are the UFOs that Congress tells us about. That's stupid. Don't wait for the aliens. We can create better anti-gravity than the aliens that Congress allegedly knows about. We don't need this. We need to have
Let's be real. It's already here. Yeah.
We need to have that's what it means to take dominion and co-create, okay? Because when we co-create, when we say, I believe Christ, that we can have a post-scarcity universe. I point out that story in the feeding the fish and loaves to the 5,000, right? You remember that story?
Oh, yeah.
Where he feeds the 5. I think that's a prophecy for Jesus is embodying how we will in history get rid of scarcity, where we will have energy too cheap to meter. We will have cures that don't cost $1 billion and bankrupt you. We can have all those things. Those are technological breakthroughs in the name of Jesus that help people where they are materially in their lack and allow them to have an abundant life in the name of Christ, given to people to access, because everything in creation is good, and we don't need to just sit there and think it's all been figured out. We need to stop that and start thinking, how can we understand how to create energy too cheap to meter? How do we create cures without having the bankruptcy to afford it? We need to think big like that and not be afraid to be afraid of being marginalized for saying this. And once you make that cool, once you make it cool to talk and think and strategize like this, now you're creating a cultural renaissance that is purely, beautifully Christian and American. And then guess what? People want to be a part of that. I know guy. I'm not joking when I'm saying that. I know a guy. I mean, look, when I'm saying this stuff, I'm not saying it.
Dave, let's hear about Crazy Bill.
I know guys who are I got to be careful. They're doing literal nuclear energy reactors in their living room where their cat is walking on the nuclear reactor, and it's low temperature, cold fusion, these types of things. I know these folks. That's why I talk about it with such fervor, because I'm not just like theoretically, well, maybe someone could do that. Like, I know people who are trying to do it, and when I go on these shows, I'm trying to do my part to kind of like create this little ripple effect to prepare the world for what these people are going to do and how we need to support them. Like, I'm not trying to say like, I know a secret guy who's got the secret of the universe. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I know people who've got real chops doing real discoveries in their living room.
Yeah.
And I don't want to like say it too early, right? Because I don't want to be that guy that's like, I've got the secret thing. But I know some of these guys. Some of them have died.
Jesus was healing people with
just healing people and just producing food out of no sign. I mean, these were miracles. He was God. He could do whatever he wanted to do. But if Christians, we believe that, obviously. We believe Christ did that. We believe Paul did it. Peter did it. I mean, all the apostles were going out and banging out miracles like 1, 2, 3, baby, every single day. Now, when you say these things, a lot of Christians are going to think, well, what is the point? Yeah, it sounds fun maybe to some of us, but like what the agency of what it's doing, what you are saying, like this is the Great Commission. You are actually, when you say scarcity, good point, you're saying people are going to be fed. When you say energy, you say less or low cost energy. You're saying more people survive, less people die. We're going to clothe more people. We're going to heal more people. We're going to feed,
which is what Jesus says is his determining factor, whether you're right. That's what Jesus says, whether you're going to be a sheep or a goat. Did you feed the people who are hungry? Did you clothe the people who are naked? Did you go to the prisoner? So every one of those things are action-oriented things that I'm telling you that we can do through culture, art, our own lives, and then the technology stuff. And I want people to get excited because they don't believe what I'm saying, because they don't believe they have the right to say this publicly. I'm going to tell you another one. I know a guy, and I know people we've talked about on our show, working on experimentation, pulling, and you're going to think this is crazy. That's why I don't want to say it. I debate about it, but I don't want to always.
No, dude, you got to know. Like I love Joe and I nerded out on Tesla because you have to understand what you're describing now is exactly the way the world was when they heard about Tesla. Everybody was like crazy. No way, no way. This is craziness, and that guy's crazy. He's in love with a pigeon. He married a pigeon. He's insane. Look at him. Just look at the guy. He's insane. The truth is that this happens all the time. So it's not that crazy to us. I mean, we're hearing you. I like to believe that stuff, and I think the government and like the who's who, all those people, they probably already have all this stuff long
right.
Before
but that
we
can't. And I agree with that.
But
that's what I was saying. I was saying earlier, we got to watch out for that because what does that do? That makes us just say apathy about it. Like, well, we can't do anything because they'll steal it.
We got to get ours.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you.
So the elemental, like, let me give you another example. I'm going to give you another example because I don't want to leave people in esoteric. I have a person I became friends with who's now passed away, but he was a chemical engineer he had a PhD from Rutgers University. He was a very advanced chemical engineer, and he was an older guy, but in his great years, his great elderly years, he discovered through kind of an accident, he was heating up. He would take bottle glass and like crush it together with a piston and mortar and turn it into this little powder. And then he would heat it in microwaves, like ordinary kitchen microwaves. And he was pulling out what his samples demonstrated to be rare earth elements like gold and platinum. So people thought he was crazy. Like, you're saying you're getting gold out of beer bottles? And he's like, yes. And so he went around telling people. Yeah. And so my point is, like, I say that, and the moment you say it, it immediately, we have this, and it's okay to have that, to be like, well, BS. But to be cynical. But the point is like a Christian says, let's follow the science, whether this guy's kooky and this sounds weird or not.
That's right.
And I follow the science. I went to his house. I filmed him. I watched what he was doing. So I actually did it before he died. And I saw him doing these things, and I saw him demonstrate some of these things. And I think he's onto something. Now, I'm not sure exactly. I'm going to tell you something. I'm not sure exactly how to scale this. There's a lot of things that it can talk about, but I want to do it right. And I don't have the team yet that was ready to do this, but I would like to get a team together to try to replicate what he was doing and to try to bring this to the public if we can replicate it successfully and demonstrate scientifically that this sample had no gold in it and now it does, or whether it's platinum, gold, whatever.
Science. Yeah.
Because then you're showing an ordinary microwave at room temperature is not 100, because current establishment physics says you can't have elemental transmutation outside of like the heat that is inside of a sun, which where nuclear fusion is, right? I don't think that's true. I think that's a false belief that scientific papers have kind of like codified unwarrantedly. Like there's no basis to keep codifying this belief that elements can't transmute from one to another at relatively low temperatures. This man's experiment, if it could actually be demonstrated successfully and replicated by enough people so that people like, podcasts and Rogan's talking about it and Andrew Tate's talking about it or whoever's talking about it, and it's becoming a thing, and scientists are saying, yeah, this is actually holding up. Hate to say it, but this tears everything open. That would be a apocalyptic, kill shot to the established order of scientism. And what it would do is it would open up an entire paradigm opportunity about, well, holy crap, if that's true, first of all, that's a potential breakthrough for all kinds of technological marvels. If you could literally print gold or print rare earth elements or print or transmute at room temperature, like imagine you scale that up to a factory and you're taking beer bottle glass or trash and you're pouring it in and you're pouring out all kinds of mass amounts of rare earth elements that goes into creating electronics. So now you don't have to fight with North Korea over rare earth elements or China over cobalt or lithium like they're doing now for your iPhone. You don't have to fight that. You don't have to go to Africa and have, blood money to be digging out the mines and raping the earth and having wars and all this stuff. You could literally have cities all over the world with room temperature creating transmutation for all of your elemental needs. That is heaven on earth coming to earth. That is Jesus Christ post-scarcity world coming into fruition. And if you did it in the name of Christ, the whole world will want to know, what more can I do if I follow the boldness of the Christ way of looking at the world, who has the courage to look at someone who seems crazy in his garage and believe that something is true, even though the textbook says it's not. That's exactly what Jesus is dealing with. The textbook said he was a freak. The textbook of his culture said he was out of line. The textbook said that he was impure, that he was healing people on the Sabbath. The textbook knowledge of his time, the settled knowledge of his time, said he was out of line on so many levels, and he still acted and he changed the world, and they killed him for it, and he still beat them by going to his death nonviolently. Now we have the creative capacity by his power in our culture to affect changes on the down payment of what he did on the cross. Jesus doesn't want us.
What you're talking about is hope. I think people need to understand that hope takes the form of agency, putting to work your talents, making art, believing in things like this. They sound crazy. I remember back in the day, Joe and I got obsessed with superconductors and like the way that you could freeze them and they would levitate. And man, we went through some crazy roads and none of this, it was always inspiring. And I'll tell you what, it was always something that I was like, when I was into it, I was like, it gives you hope, but it's a positive kind of hope. It's not like, man, I hope Trump wins, and that's going to give us some reprieve for like 4 years. Right. And then it's back down into the chaos. Yeah. Freaking, it's going to be back in the meat grinder. Who knows, right? Is it going to be Tucker Carlson next? Like, we don't know. It's such a better feeling because the world after Tesla was a brand new world. And then, of course, like if Tesla was protected, right? If he would have went and been insulated by the right people who was able to help him and encourage his genius, think about how much more he could have done.
Well, think about if, like, when you bring up the
instead
example,
he was attacked.
You got Westinghouse, you got these guys that didn't serve God, they served money. They served themselves.
You've heard the story, right? Where he goes into, I think it was it JP, one of the old oil moguls, and he's like, you know what? I figured out how to do this, what we just talked about, but with no cables. And he's like, I'm not interested in that because I make wires, and basically you're cutting me out of the deal. So. And so poor Tesla, you got to think like he's trying to adapt his genius to an outdated, horrible system. And he had to go through that instead of, like you said, in the church, people congregating around people with good ideas, not MLM schemes with freaking Doterra oils and all this other garbage. It's like, really? Do we need another diffuser in this house? Or, like, do we need to have, some cryptocurrency hedge?
But
like,
all it takes is for people to learn that that's what the gospel's about, and then somebody to just be the guy who does it first. The hardest thing to do in the Bible is that first stone. The first stone. The Bible talks about who will cast the first stone, right? And the first stone is the hardest thing to do in anything in society. Now, because it's easy mimetically to just fall in line after the first person does something. And that's why that's why Jesus hones in on who's going to cast the first stone, because he's trying to save that woman's life. That community is locked up in a hive mind of self-righteousness.
That's where Renee Girard, that's where that breaking that mimetic cycle really comes to bear. and that's why it's so important to talk about it, because otherwise we feel like we're just being authentic to, and I'm not going to say it's human nature. Like our nature is to want God and to obey God. That's the true nature. We weren't, the whole red pill idea, like our nature is to go find abundance and sexual partners and everything. It's like, no, that's your fleshly, that's you without your nature. Your true nature is to find God. And that's our true nature too, is to develop and grow. I mean, what do you think we'd be doing in heaven? Just sitting around? Like, come on.
Yeah.
It's going to be a whole lot of fun, because we're going to be
Earth.
progressing.
It's going to be here.
Yeah.
It's here.
Yeah.
Heaven's on earth. That's what.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Keep going, David. I was just going to.
The heavens on earth, the kingdom of God is within you all, is what Jesus says. It's a plural you. So it's the community gathered together that brings in the kingdom of God on earth. And that community is based on nonviolence, which means I am a kind of political voluntarist. I think Christianity means the end of the state. I think it means the end of government as we understand government to be, as a monopoly that uses violence. Like, for example, I'll give you an example politically. They said the sound of freedom, right? And you look at all this money for child trafficking, right, that they're making. You know how you could gut that stuff tomorrow? Like, from a political policy standpoint, if you legalized drugs, but for adults, and you legalize even, I know that people don't like this, but even, adult sex work that's consensual within certain frameworks that are, ethical and everything, that would cut the profits of these cartels so down that they would not have the billions of dollars in resources to control cities, distribution systems, weapons, guns, murderers for hire, to finance this new product of child trafficking. Well, it's not new, but this burgeoning problem that's getting worse and worse. Does that make sense? If you're a company and you produce all these products, and we legalized the competition for X, Y, and Z, or your baseline products that you've been having a monopoly on, you wouldn't have the funds and the finances to be able to maintain the elaborate, powerful network you need to smuggle children. And it would be much more effective for us to take out those cartels who are smuggling children, because they would not be as powerful as they are today, where they control banks and governments. See, that takes a Christian mindset, right? Because now you got to go back. You asked me about politics. This is where it gets tricky, because now you got to go back and look at what Jesus says. God desires mercy, not sacrifice. Do not resist evil with violence. Does that exclude heroin use? Okay, if Jesus wanted to save the woman's life who was accused of adultery, would he not want to save the person's life who was accused of heroin from being put in a prison where he could be assaulted or she could be assaulted? That's a heinous, torturous crime of violence to enact on someone for a nonviolent addiction that's a problem of their heart or their mind or their chemical imbalances. So a Christian nation does not put people who are afflicted by drug addiction into cages. And the only way you can understand this is when you understand that when Jesus said the turning of the cheek principle, that was not something that was meant to be like passivity. It was a proactive way of allowing powers to fall on their own exertion by nonviolence. So, for example, if you were to legalize these drugs that people are addicted to, first of all, it would eliminate a lot of the hot stove effect of making it a taboo, cool underground thing that I want to do as an expression of my distrust with normal society. Number two, it would, again, eliminate the obscene profit margins of the product, and therefore it would eliminate the oligarchy cartels from having their power. It's like this. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but that's the way of Christ. The way of Christ does not say, this is an evil, hit it and punch it and stomp it down with violence.
It would also eliminate the cost fighting it.
Yes, and it would eliminate a lot of the thefts that go on in these cities, because people are fighting they're stealing to afford the expensive high, right? If the drug is legalized, it eventually drops the product's profit price so low that it doesn't become so obscenely high. Number two, it's gonna drop the murder rate. In the alcohol prohibition days, 10 Tampa, Florida, not too far from you guys, was one of the highest murder murder rates per capita in the country. It was double what Detroit and Chicago are today in terms of murder, I believe. And so they were a big hub for running rum and stuff. And so therefore, at the time that Prohibition came into effect, it became a very murderous city to be in Tampa because of all of that cartel moving of the rum and everything. Yeah, so what happens is, when they repealed Prohibition, the murder rate in Tampa dropped off the cliff. It fell, skyrocketed down. So that same thing would happen in Chicago and other places. I understand it's a little trickier with things like fentanyl when there's like these things are a product of Prohibition, by the way. That's what happens. It's like what happens when you have a Prohibition society is that you have to get a higher high with a smaller package.
That's
right. You got, that's the same reason why moonshine came about when beer and wine was banned, because they're like, all right, how do we get the biggest bang for our buck because it's a costly thing to move product that can get you murdered and arrested. So you want to get the most amount of bang for your buck as you distribute your moonshine, not beer with 5% alcohol like a Bud Light. So that's where you get moonshine coming about. So what happens, the same thing happens why we get fentanyl. It's like, okay, we can get it. And it's also, of course, caused by the hospital systems and their addictions to opioids, throwing them out like candy. When you don't need that, you need to get rid of seed oils, which drops your pain. Did you know the guy that we had, Dr. Bruce Hammond from UC Davis, he's funded he's done all this extensive, he's like 80 years old. He's this awesome professor from UC Davis. He's done all this work showing how toxic seed oils are. And one of the biggest things that he gets his funding from is a group that wants him to develop his ideas, because they've realized that seed oils and vegetable oil is causing the chronic pain problems that people have that make them turn to these opioids to mask it. So it's a drug-free nonprofit group that's funding his work to prove seed oils cause the pain, because they wanted to, what the FDA, what the pharmaceutical company wants to do is develop a drug to prohibit the effects that the seed oils are having in causing that pathway to pain. What we have to do as a society is get those seed oils out of our society. They're a toxin, and that would reduce pain. That would drop people's addiction needs for opioids, because they wouldn't need such a dangerous thing to alleviate pain they don't have anymore. In the name of Jesus. You see how this works? I want to go back. This is systems thinking, folks. We got to employ systems thinking, where we're going to engineering. We're going to UC Davis to learn about seed oils. We're bringing it all back in, rolling it back to that principle I just said about why we can't fight evil with evil. We have to turn the other cheek, not to like, oh, you're a drug dealer, I want you to sell your cocaine because I'm like a libertine. No, I don't want you to sell cocaine. So I'm going to kick your profiteering tail by allowing your overreach to fall on its own face. So you'd be much better off selling radishes by the time we're done with you, because legalization opens them up and allows them to lose their profit margin. That, to me, is a Christian approach. That's a Christian approach to dealing with the problem of the heart. Christ does not put a gun to our heads to make sure we go to follow him and have eternal salvation. How much more so should we show the same level of voluntary respect for the free will of our neighbor by not putting a gun to their head to make them not get high? To me, that's a no-brainer if you're a Christian. If God respects our free will in loving him, how much more so should we extend that same grace to other issues like people having addiction issues that are chemical problems?
I completely agree. And I'd like to say we got a comment up here, and it inevitably comes up all the time. I've had this conversation with a lot of the younger guys, because when you hear turn the other cheek, somebody's going to say, and no violence, you're going to hear somebody say, well, Jesus in the temple. And here's my take on it. You guys can kind of chime in and see what you think here. When is violence appropriate for a believer? What circumstances? Because you got to keep in mind, we're talking sometimes to an audience that's younger. Maybe they don't understand these concepts at all. So when you look at the story, or this when Jesus was actually, it's not a story, when he was in this temple and he braided the cord and he whipped and got the money lenders out, what does that represent? Well, and I'd like to hear what you guys think about this. This is what after deeply thinking about this, because I would hear it all the time, like Jesus was violent. You should be violent against sin that's entering your body, because you're the temple now. So if it's, prostitution, sin,
anything that you're putting into your body, sin, just sin. Your outrage should be like violent for the sin that you're allowing into your life. That doesn't mean you go out and be violent to people that are doing, like you said, a drug addict or something like that. Are you violent to them? You know, did Christ do that to you in your fallen state?
So you're pulling the correlative of the temple being
your body,
our bodies,
yeah,
and the sin of what these collectors were doing, selling the pigeons as the sin, and him having a violent, pretty violent,
like vomiting it out.
He wasn't hurting people, but he definitely was flipping the tables and get the hell out, sin, get the hell out for our bodies and the way we should treat sin.
Right, exactly. We should our violence. With regard to sin, it's like I think about the spiritual battle that we're all in all the time. You know, like that battle is probably violent. There's stuff going on in that metaphysical realm that we can only think of. Like, I mean, it's violent. Violence doesn't always have to be skin on skin. Like somebody can say something very violent to you in a metaphysical way. It's going to just completely level you. There's people who have been spoken to in such a way where their dreams get taken away. Like maybe there's a young chemist who had a brilliant idea, and then his professor's like, look, you're an idiot. We all have great ideas, but they come to nothing. Why don't you go find a better rubber for car tires and get hired and make some money, right? That's violence. Those are different forms of violence. It's not always,
physical violence.
Physical violence.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. But then, just to put a caveat to what you're saying, a lot of people will say, well, because you've changed the definition of violence to include real forms of violence like psychological violence and spiritual violence and stuff like that. Well, therefore, the spiritual violence of allowing drugs to run rampant around your city needs to be prohibited by force of, arresting people who are selling it. Yeah. So we got to be careful with that. I'm not saying you were going there. I'm just saying I want to answer that too, because once you agree with that, a lot of people will then say, well, see, therefore the violent, and the left will do that about speech. They'll say, silence is violence, right? If you're not saying agreement with me, you're part of the violent problem of the systemic violence and all that. So I agree with you 100%. I'm just saying when it comes to
what's your prerogative, right? Like, so take for instance the drug dealers, right? Or something of that nature. If your goal, or you can explain to them the way you just did, that you're actually subjugating that violence through allowing people to have freedom to acquire these substances without the cartels, without the black market that they're funding. It's kind of like you're showing them, because we get into this word salad shit all the time, man. It's brutal. When we're in the red pill, it's like, egalitarian, complementarian, all this
semantic.
It's semantic. But it's good because you want to be as precise as you can with your speech. Like, we want to know what forgiveness is. We want to know what faith is. We want to know how faith is different from trust and belief. We need to know that, all these words, if we don't interpret them correctly, we're never going to build squat. Nothing's going to be built unless we do. So why don't you tell us what violence is? And this was just my take on it. That's why I wanted to hear.
No, I agree with that violence, but so I think where do we go? When is it appropriate for Christians to use violence? I think was the question, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, again, that's the infinite thing. If we're talking about physical violence, or what I would call physical force, I don't think it's violent to subdue someone who's assaulting a woman. Like, you know what I mean? If you guys are walking out in the parking lot and there's some dude like brutalizing somebody, I don't care what it's a woman or what. I'm just using an emotional thing that it resonates to men, right? You see, it could be a guy, whatever. But someone's getting brutalized, and you have the means to grab that attacker and get them subdued, whatever your technique is or weapon or means of doing it, then do it. And I don't think you have to stand before God and him say, you sinned there. Okay, obviously, I don't think that's a sin. I think it's stupid, right? So when we say that, if it's okay for you to do as a Christian individually, morally, then I think it's okay for you to do if you get a group of people at your studio to do it with you, right?
Yeah. And it's just
okay. So is it okay? So I'm just sort of walking you through my process of understanding violence from a Christian.
Yeah.
So if it's okay for me to restrain someone physically hurting somebody else as an individual, as a Christian, then it's okay for me to do it with a group. and then it's okay for me to do if a group comes together and votes to make a law that says we're going to hire people to restrain this stuff from happening and punish people who attack people who do that. We're going to put you in a timeout space. If you try to assault people, you will be put in a collective timeout space that our community will pay for to make sure that you don't continue to try to just assault people. Okay? Is that is a Christian I'm working through from the individual, because Christ deals with us as individuals, not just as a collective. And it's all works the same way. You know, what you're allowed to do individually as a Christian, I think you can grant to a community to do for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if I'm allowed to
translate, right?
Yeah, I know this sounds like very basic, but I'm trying to build that basic foundation that you said the younger audience might need. If you are allowed to do something as an individual in your conscience, you're allowed to do it with a group, and you're allowed to do it with a law, as we're voting for this law that says thou shalt not kill or thou shalt not steal or whatever, and there's punishment, and we're going to restrain you if you do it. But here's the thing. Apply that same process to someone getting high. You're walking down your neighborhood, you look in the window of your neighbor, and you see him snorting a line of cocaine. Do you as a Christian have a right to barge into their house, grab them, throw them on the ground, put your knee on the back of their back or neck or whatever, tase them if they move the wrong way, shoot their dog if it's barking at you, trying to bite you in the process? Do you have a right to do that?
No.
What? Oh, do you have a right to do it if you get what if you got your entire neighborhood to gather together? It's a little HOA community. Would that be okay if you got all of them? They're all going to go after Crazy Bill because he's making weird noises in the garage with his experiment, and he's doing lines of cocaine at night, and you saw it in the window. You've all had enough.
The witch hunt.
You've all had enough. Would it? I just want to hear from all of you guys. Is it okay if your whole neighborhood, except Bill, agrees that it's okay to go in here and gently, as best as you can, physically subdue him and put him in a cage because you don't want him to do cocaine?
Not in that case for me.
No. Right is right, wrong, yeah. It's like Joe said, it's the Salem witch trial. It's the witch hunt.
See, that's what I'm trying to show you. What I'm trying to show the public. This is so important. I'm trying to show you guys, and I know you see it. I'm just trying to walk it through in a very slow process. This is what it means to follow Jesus's message when he says, "Who's going to cast the first stone?" I'm asking. That's what I'm saying in a different way.
Yeah,
he deconstructs the violence, right? Because as a group, that look at that little voting group. It's like a little voting group. They've all got little stones. They're about to throw the rocks, right? As a group, they're sitting nice and happy. But he deconstructs them into individuals, and they're like, well, shit, who's going to be, me or you or Bill? Bill, I know I saw you last night. You ain't no one if you throw the stone first. And Timmy, yeah, I saw you checking that girl out. You know, so this ain't working. And then you start to think, well, shoot, I don't want to be the first one to throw this rock. I'm not the best guy, and I don't want to be the guy that like throws this rock and just bam, bash her head. I don't want that on me. I was hoping if it was a crowd of rocks, my stone might just fall next to her, and I ain't got to worry about any conscience. I was just kind of going along with the thing, whatever. Guess what? That's called voting. Okay. So now we know, what, see, that one freaking story, man, deconstructs all of politics. There's so much wisdom there. It's better than Machiavelli. That one little story, if you actually work it through in your own life, like blows the whole political thing open, because now you run that through on everything. So if how
about this scenario? Because to go back to keep on politics and then America's actions with war. Yeah. What if you got maybe it's an individual and this individual is going to do damage to someone else? Can you intercede on that behalf? To extrapolate with America, like preemptively going to war in their mind.
Like that Tom Cruise movie where those like weird muses crap out those balls and they there's no crime because they stop the crime before it happens. Like you get some information from somebody who's about to do something horrible and you stop it before they do it. Yeah.
Yeah. How does it play out there in your mind?
Well, which one? The one that you get like a good tip, or the one that like you have perfect knowledge? Because Dick Cheney certainly didn't have perfect knowledge.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Well, I think today it's just a good tip. Like you can't ever say, or the CIA will just make up the tip.
Well, I mean, again, like so what that's saying to me is like, okay, so I heard there's a neighbor. Okay, so there's like, okay, I heard there was a neighbor down the road on the other side of the city who is going to go and go into another person's house in his neighborhood and just like violently beat them up and kill them. I am a moral do-gooder. I heard a rumor that that's going to happen. So I'm going to show up at that man's house and kill him and his family before they kill somebody else's family. That's stupid. That's not Christian morality.
Weapons of mass destruction, baby. Let's go find him. First, we're gonna destroy.
I mean, and that whole thing falls apart when you look at every, because every narrative, like this Ukraine war thing, they're always selling you on, oh my goodness, these guys were just saints, and all of a sudden Putin just decided to be maniacal. It's like, no, that's not how this works. This is a very complicated thing, and our foreign policy is like Emperor Palpatine in the original Star Wars, where remember when Darth Vader and Luke are fighting, like beating the ever-loving hell out of each other, and he's like, yes, I'm feeding up. That's DC.
Yeah, exactly.
Just play that clip every time they say another $100 billion, because all they're doing is taking two people who are basically family, Ukrainians and Russians, and like stoking them up for as much as they could, throwing them together. And as they fight, they're like, I'm feeding off of this for my dollar. Okay, you guys are sick. That's why Oliver Anthony said, what he said about you guys, your dollar ain't shit, or whatever he said, Exactly. So that's why our dollar ain't shit, as he says, and that's why people are sick and tired of our world order, and that's why our government is going crazy and trying to batten down the hatches to get power back in our society. So we can't mirror. Here's what I want to say, man. You got to remember this. I want this to sink into the audience, since we're getting into the weeds of this. You can't mirror it back. Okay. So, if you're going to, it's like, don't screw up your Christ power.
Yeah, exactly.
If you go in, so there's the anti-establishment and there's the establishment, right? And if we go in there and we say, because I'm telling you, this is common in the conservative circles to want, like, we're going to get you back and arrest all your people. You just watch.
Vengeance, yeah.
When you have that mindset, you're right. Vengeance is a spirit that Jesus says to rebuke. It's not just because it feels good. It's because this is not how the world will be won over. The world isn't won over through vengeance. So when your argument is, hey, they're persecuting me, but you just wait. When I get in there, I'll get them back. It's like, well, the people in the middle are kind of, I don't know. Then I guess you're all just the same to me. You're mimetic undifferentiated, and they see it. They viscerally feel it. So it's like, it's like the same thing. You can use a neighbor analogy. I hate that family down the road. They're always, beating people up. I can't wait till my sons and we're going to go beat their kids up, and we'll show. So the people who are the kind of moderate middles in your neighborhood, whose side are they going to be on? Right. It's kind of like, well, they're already the neighbor bullies we know. I don't know what you're going to do if you're the new bully that's like going to beat their guys up. Okay. So then what makes you any different? That's how people who are haunted by Christ, which our society is, that's how they feel when they hear Christians, so-called Christians, saying, we've been abused, but you just wait till we lock all you guys up. Okay, you're just the same people then. Like, I'll just stick with what we have. What we have is the garbage Hollywood movies and garbage music, but it's okay. It's what we know. It's the devil we know versus the devil we don't know. And people are going to stick with the devil they know. And the devil they know is the liberal version of being a bully tyrant. And any conservative version just looks like a fake wannabe ripoff, and people would just naturally cling to. It's like it's watching two douchebags fighting over a girl, and the one's smacking the girl around, and the guy says, "You wait till I get it. You can't do that, and I'm going to do that to her when I get her under my." What the heck? Who wants to? Okay, we'll just stick with what. That's the villain. Okay, we'll stick with that. If you have somebody that says, "No, don't do that," and I'm not going to do the same thing back.
You stop.
That's a fresh perspective. Okay, I'll try that.
Yeah, and that's like, I'd like to say this for the listeners so they understand that there is action to be taken. So it's not I'm going to get them back. It's I'm going to get them up. We're going to lift them up. They are the people we have to serve. So we're going to use our Christ gifts, our talents, our artillery, the things for overthrowing this mimetic foulness. Now, we have a very good question, because the four of us here we've studied some theology, and we have, I think the four of us here have come to the point where we're not complacent, waiting for the world to burn and then Jesus to come back. A lot of people who are listening to you are maybe listening to you. We got one comment from JR. It says,
Is the world, David, you describing a post-millennial perspective? So I think what he's asking is this after Christ comes back, which I'll let you take that question.
Well, the post-millennial perspective is that popular within some Calvinist circles, some it's in various branches of the church. It's also in some charismatic circles. It's called, some people call it dominionism, dominion theology, and there's all kinds of interpretations of. I mean, I would say, let me back up. I think postmillennialism is distinct, but dominionism is a type of like add-on to that, which is like we should take power over America and make it Christian. I don't accept dominionism, and I'm not really a postmillennialist. But what postmillennialism says, I'm okay. I'm a fellow traveler in that conversation, because postmillennialism at its heart is basically saying that the best is yet to come in history, right? That it's not that Jesus will save the world, right? So when we are always talking about Jesus is the savior of the world, well, what is he actually saving? The average like defeatist Christian mindset, which is in all the branches of the church, is something like, well, he came to save your soul if you'll have him. And so our job as his body is to pick off as many souls away from Satan's jaws as we can, as this whole thing falls to hell, and then hope we all get whisked up to heaven or get raptured or whatever, or die and go to heaven.
That's pretty much the standard
model. Doesn't the post-millennials already view like Nero was the representation of 666, right?
Some of them do, yeah. That's like partial preterism, where they believe that a lot of the different things that are in there are already fulfilled, and I think that they're right on some of that, yeah.
Like, but I think like Michael Jones from Inspiring Philosophy kind of opened that door to the three
I
of
watched
us.
his video on that topic. It was interesting.
It is very compelling and provocative because, I mean, do you believe, like, the Catholics think that Jesus is coming back one time? You know, and you think of this Protestant model, it's like he's coming back twice, you know, first for this rapture event and then, you know, again. It's kind of weird. And so Michael Jones, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's got a great channel called Inspiring Philosophy, and he's a complete nerd of nerds, badass theologian master. He's studied under Michael Heiser and a bunch. I mean, dude is just really smart, but he has that perspective where basically, in a nutshell, we're going to make this post-millennial until basically what he thinks is until we make that this perfect world, this world that Christ would want to come back to, you know, Christ isn't coming back.
I generally agree with that. Yeah. So I agree. So I don't know what that makes me. And I think the millennial debate is about something that you can, like, there's a broader category of like optimistic eschatology, which fits in some amillennialism and some postmillennialism. I don't really have a camp I've decided about that. I think the broader point is true, that the Bible begins in a garden, it ends in a city, that Jesus is saving the world. The Bible says that he is reigning at the right hand of the Father until he has made his enemies a footstool. Right. And then it describes his enemies as death, devil, and sin. So I believe he's reigning through us as his body on earth, and that he is conquering death, devil, and sin. The last enemy is death. So that means in history, we should have less of what those three things are. We should cure aging before Jesus comes back, or we're in the process of curing it as he returns. Because I don't get particular about how this works. It's God's job. I'm just trying to listen and understand what he's saying. What it seems to be, the parousia, the parousia, where we get these term for the rapture, seems to be talking about what a Roman emperor would do when they go out to a new city and they conquer a new city. They bring those conquered, subdued city people into a parade to kind of show off who they've now conquered and extended the Roman Empire to. So it's not something that happens as like I'm helping catch a few guys as the whole thing falls apart. It's the opposite. It's victory. It's a conquest. And it's the arrival of the emperor after he has completed his conquest, after his army has completely subdued the new territory.
It makes a lot more sense that way, doesn't it?
Yeah,
You know, I mean,
because especially because that's the context that Paul's writing when because the whole political battle is Jesus Lord or is Caesar Lord? Is Caesar's way of doing thing, which would lock people up in rape cages, by the way, that are addicted to drugs, Mr. Christian. That's Caesar's way. That Caesar is Lord in your heart. If you live like that and want violence to be done on you for people who do those things, are you going to follow the Caesar way or the Jesus way? And that was the same thing that the crowd was given to by Pilate. Pilate said, "Who do you want to save? Who do you want to kill? Do you want to kill Barabbas, or do you want to kill Jesus?" Right? Barabbas was a revolutionary figure like William Wallace. He's not a Jack the Ripper. Everybody makes him out like he's Jack the Ripper, just randomly murdering people. And the crowd's like, yeah, let's bring Jack the Ripper to our community today. No, they didn't want that. They wanted a guy who was like a William Wallace, who was trying to violently revolt against Rome's power. And so they said in their earliest texts and Mark and so forth, Barabbas' name is Yeshua Barabbas. So it's two Jesuses, two Yeshuas, Bar, which means of, Abba, which is the Father. So you have two Jesuses, sons of the Father. Which one will the crowd choose? Will the crowd choose the nonviolent, self-emptying Christ, or will they choose the Barabbas of their own imagination, which is the way of Caesar, which is might makes right? The
crowd chooses versus the Ben David, right?
Yeah. So the crowd chooses. Yep. The crowd chooses the wrong Jesus, and they typically choose the wrong Jesus throughout all of history, including the Christians who say that they wouldn't.
And so along with that Jesus comes a toolkit, right? Along with that Jesus comes this ideology. Along with that Jesus comes a character. And it's funny because like with this millennium talk, like I remember talking to a kid, I forget which one, but it might have been in summer camp, but it was weird. I remember one of the kids asking, like, basically it was this: if Jesus lives in us, then how is he coming back? You know, like just a kid thinking about it, you know, in its own kid mind. Yeah. And some of those things like makes a lot of sense. You're like, he's already here. You know, what are we waiting for next? You know, really.
Yeah. And he's here, but he's not fully completed in his manifestation until we, his body, defeat his enemies, because it says he's reigning in like a heavenly unseen realm, but he's enacting his will through his body on earth, and then he will come down I believe Jesus will appear in a second coming in the full flesh, and he will come after we've completed his mission on earth. I mean, to me, that's what the whole point of his first miracle is. In the first miracle of the wedding of Cana, he brings out the best wine at the end of the wedding party. The wedding party weddings are always a symbol of the incarnational completion of heaven and earth, right? It's male and female, heaven and earth coming together. And that's the story. It's the story of the Bible is the story of a boy meets girl. It's Jesus saving his bride, humanity, right? And there's all these types. And that wedding, his first miracle, is important because it's saying that in Jesus's world order, the best is yet to come. The best wine will be at the end of history, not only the best wine given to you at the beginning. Most Christians typically have a pagan view of history. They believe that everything's getting worse, right?
Yeah, that was going to be my question. What do we say to these Christians that think everything's falling off a cliff?
Well, that's the common conception.
Like we're heading towards, all the problems and Revelations described. Yeah.
That's what
I think history
about it's apocalypse. Right. And real quick, I just had this come to my brain, which might have been, it's interesting. It just kind of percolated. So we talk about the church being a bride, and you're talking about the wine, this wedding, right? And what happens after the wedding? Usually they consummate it, and then there's the bride gives birth to something. Like us as the church is supposed to create something. Mm-hmm. We're supposed to bring this creation.
We're supposed to be the progenitor of the new heaven.
Of the new, we're supposed to co-create. So I just thought that was a really cool kind of like
that is cool
progressive look at what happens past. What does the bride do? What does a bride do? What does a woman do? They bring forth life. They have a child. That's what the bride does.
Yeah,
that's what the church is supposed to do. It's going to be hard for a lot of people who are addicted to the hysteria of news and the cockfight that's going on all the time to try and disconnect from that And like Jordan Peter says, let that piece of themselves just burn away. You know, there's going to be a whole lot less left, but whatever is left will be good and it will be Christ-like in order to find what God has given you to do and actually have things like peace, actually have things like joy, be able to cherish life in a way that's looking forward to where we're going next and to enjoy that process, because that was an issue that I when we were studying the mimetic theory and Rene Girard, he goes to apocalypse, right? He's like, it's incontrovertible. It's going to happen. That's the next stop, baby. It's apocalypse. And I wonder what you thought about that in turn, because you're a whole lot more knowledgeable about the theory than we are.
He says in his last book, Battling.
Because I mean, apocalypse what I understood is apocalypse can mean two things, right? It's apocalypse for what world? Apocalypse for the shit storm we're in now. You know, because something's going to die. Apocalypse for this world now makes sense to give way to the good. Like it didn't at first. I was like, oh, this sounds horrible. But then I was like, it actually makes more sense.
Yeah.
When you think about the bad dying, the apocalypse for sin, this is the end of sin, the end of age of sin.
Well, he says in Battling to the End, his last book, he says that he's kind of pessimistic, but he still keeps optimism because he says history is radically open about how we're going to do it. And I agree with that too. I think there's an easy way to have this thing, work out with Jesus coming back where we start living like Christ, and we can all choose to do that. And it'll medically be contagious to be righteous for God, right. Or you can do it the hard way. And there's a whole spectrum of all that, various levels of hard way about how stupid, like we could blow each other up with nukes right now and some of us would still survive. And that would really be a wrinkle in things, but hell, maybe that would be the way Jesus would save the world, because there'd only be 100 people and they'd all be really righteous and he'd come down and say, all right, this is good enough. So, there's different ways that we can splice this, but it's radically open to how we're going to like play our role as his body on earth. And so right. I don't remember what you were saying there, but I
was just kind of clearing that up for the post-millennial, the ideas of apocalypse, just kind of updating these things so that we can see them from a different perspective. Like apocalypse means our world, Christ's world comes.
Well, apocalypse means it's a literature. It means unveiling, like an unveiling of how things are. So when you're so it doesn't have to mean Armageddon. We take that word apocalypse and we make it synonymous with the word Armageddon, which is like the last battle, right?
Everybody does.
So that's got to be clear. Apocalypse means unveiling of how things really are.
That's good, right?
I think that's kind of the key issue there in terms of like separating those words. But again, we're so hardwired to hear the word apocalypse and think end of the world. Now, I think it's going to go better than it was. I think we're going in a better direction. I was in an old jail in St. Augustine, Florida recently, and I was looking at a newspaper ad they had in the 1920s. They were talking, it was an ad, and I was sitting in the jail where the people were housed while they were putting these ads out around the community. You could pay like 25 cents to see this guy. It said his name. He's going to be hanged, and you can watch it. And it includes, we're going to dissect his brain afterwards. A scientist is going to open it up, and we're going to see what this brain's all about, since it's a murderer or whatever that he's being killed for. And I thought about it, and I was like, it was a chilling thing, because I'm sitting in this jail where people like this guy were killed, and people paid to watch this guy wrangling around, and it was not considered a taboo underground thing. It was normal, decent society paying this in the mainstream paper. And I'm sitting here 100 years after this in the jail where this happened, and I can feel like there's kind of like a feeling of the energy there. And I'm like, it's like, this whole thing about like, if you're swimming and you come across a great white. I've never done that. But what happens when you're swimming in life in an old jail and you're like come across the great white, and that's your fellow human species that you're a part of. Mm-hmm. And you look in the mirror and you realize we're the great white, right? We're this, like, we have so much violent stuff just 100 years ago that we've been able to relatively move past in some way.
A really good example of that Joe and I just kind of came across was eugenics. And how that whole thing began in the late 1800s, and how Margaret Thatcher and her taking, or Hitler taking that from them, and just the idea of the clinics out there that they were taking people's reproductive parts out
and how long that actually lasted. It was like 40 or 50 years. And it's like, wow, that great white was really swimming around for a long time.
Well, you got to be very careful with what virtue is. And a lot of these people were being, in their own minds, and to a lot of the people around them, virtuous. The Catholic Church was being virtuous in the Inquisition. The Inquisition was them making people pretty much akin to like psychology would be today. They were trying to make the world a better place. They're trying to cure these people of this evil that was inside.
That's what Rene Girard says, right? He says, let's be careful not to judge people based on where we stand in history, because they were working out salvation from their framework as best as they could.
Like the whole slavery thing.
Too.
Yeah. Could they have done better? Absolutely.
And it can seem like you're doing something good for somebody. And because you're doing something good for somebody, you are able to do this in sort of a belligerent manner. It almost like allows you to just, pull the stops out, pull the boundaries out, and just, dig right in. And we have to be careful of doing that. That's why I liked when you brought up the drugs, when you brought up the drug situation, because that's something that a lot of Christians they don't want to broach, drugs and prostitution, sort of the underbelly of the human race, and the kind of the way that we politicize these things, say, hey, you take care of it. And then it actually makes the problem worse. There's more violence. There's more. We grew up in the ghetto. Like, we were the only white kids. We're not even white. We're Latin. We're Colombian, Italian, Romanian, but we're the only lighter skinned kids in our ghetto. And there were projects, there was government housing right over there. We grew up very poor. And we saw the crackheads every day. We saw the prostitutes every day. We walked past them. We would get offered drugs all the time. I find them on the street, just like dime bags of this, dime bags of that. Just people fall out of their pockets. They're halfway tweaked out of their brains anyway, so they don't care. It's just like falling out of their pocket. You'll find this stuff as a kid. The interesting thing about it is that when you're around it like that, the taboo of it is just destroyed. You're not so interested in taking your life and flushing it down the toilet over. You see the Mercedes-Benz come in with like the blonde chick and the prostitutes, and you see them buy the coke and you see them leave, but you know what that does. You see what it does in real time. So you don't really want to do it as well. You see what it is in its agency, and its truth. And as a kid, kids see that stuff. They're more, they can understand that when you're younger. And I think it just kind of, it's like, that's education. That's how you learn. That's the real, dare, that was our dare class, growing up. And it's very powerful. It really works, man. And I think that's what you were kind of saying too, with like letting these sort of things do it and taking Christ's approach. Like, we're not going to put them in rape cages or, get rid of it and act like it doesn't exist. So they have to go in these neighborhoods and support these habits. Makes for a solution,
Hey man, I don't know, maybe I'm getting it wrong, but when I hear Jesus say, I'm going to judge people at the end of the world by who was there for the prisoner, you were there for me. I think it's okay for me to take that and say, yeah, and how about I go further, Jesus, and make sure we don't put that guy in prison, because he said, if you visited the prisoner, you visited me.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even realize how scandalous that is. We just pass by it. Like, what do people go to prison for? Many horrible things.
Mm-hmm. It's like a call not to judge in a lot of ways too.
Yeah, and he's saying, and you're staying in solidarity with. You're staying in solidarity with the scapegoat. You're staying in solidarity with the outcast.
Yeah. And that brings me, as another representation of this idea of having governance when we don't need it. I think about the Jews, after Judges, and they want a king so that they can have this mimetic rivalry with the surrounding nations that they were admiring. They wanted the same political stories that these guys were having. They wanted to have their number one player on their beautiful throne that they could go look up and say, he's our guy. And God said, I already am your guy. I'm the unseen God that made it all, but I'll give it to you anyway. And look at what happens, right? So, and what I think the church fails to realize, I was having a conversation actually with Glenn, and we're talking about how because God blesses something, does that inadvertently mean that he thinks it's okay? So look at Jacob with several wives, and he's having all kinds of problems with several wives. Does that mean, and he blesses Jacob, right? He has all these sons. They become the fathers of Israel. But does that mean it's okay to have a lot of wives, right? We see the implicit nature of the lesson is no, a lot of wives create hell for you.
And but God will bless you despite it. And you see that played out again when they have the kings. So when Israel has the kings, God still blesses the nation of Israel, right? And he's still blessing America now. Yeah. But we have to give up those kings and those very, like you said, I like using these terms to get the guys to use them. It's a pagan idea of religion, right? So our conservative side, which is I don't want anything to change, is that repetitious pagan idea of religion where we are not progressing in our ideas and allowing the church to facilitate growth in the means of bringing heaven here now. Bill in his basement, whatever kind of ideas that make these people feel strange because they want to be same. They don't understand in the church that our union is in our diversity and how we've been differentiated, particularly to accomplish jobs. Yeah. That is what makes us so similar in the way God made us to do beautiful things. So if we have these cookie cutter churches where everything is the same, the worship is the same, the interests within the church are the same, everybody's doing the same stuff over and over again. It's like those Israelites under the king in that same exact religious pagan sort of beat and vibe instead of a fresh one where you get a deformed church that way. Right. Like I said last night, you get just like a talking head without a body. You know, like how many times is the guy with weird stuff to say? Bringing up the ghettos, tell that no one wants to listen to him. They just like immediately people are just like, I'd rather just hear about this stuff that I've already heard about 600 times. Let me hear that one more time. You know, it's like
I'd like to step in it further because it's like I'll give you more practical policy things. If it's Trump versus Biden, obviously I want Trump to win. You know, if it's Kennedy Jr., RFK Jr., I want Kennedy to win. You know, like I want, and if it's Obama versus Romney, I don't care. If it's McCain versus Obama, I don't care. If it's Bush versus Kerry, I don't care. If it's Trump versus Hillary, I want Trump. If it's Trump versus Biden, I want Trump. Now, here's what my litmus test is on that. Now, people get mad when I say that, right? Because I got a lot of purists. Because I just said that Christianity is the end of the state. Why am I saying I would go with Trump on that? Because Trump literally got friends of mine out of prison. He literally pardoned to the name friends of mine that I worked hard trying to get their message out there. I'd write articles. I would let them write. They would like one guy, Craig Cecil would write me handwritten letters and sometimes typed up letters in an old fashioned typewriter from prison and would mail them to me. I'd say, send me an editorial. I'll type it and put it out on my media outlets that I write articles for at DailyCaller or Newsmax or whatever. And so he'd send me these things and I'd type it up. And it was his case about why he needed to get out. He was in prison for a nonviolent crime of helping trucks move marijuana. And he got a life sentence and with no option for parole or anything. He destroyed his whole family, his marriage.
That's violence, right? That's violence against society. That's just it, right.
So Trump got my friend Craig Cecil out of prison and others too. Rufus Rochelle, John Bolin, other friends of mine that I advocated for their clemency on my radio show back when he was in power. So he actually got things done for my friends, right? And people, it wasn't whether I knew him or not, I still was supportive for that. Number two, here's another way to look at it. If you're pragmatically going to vote for the one who's going to kill the least amount of people. I know that's a horrible thing, but we're dealing with a mafia pagan religion called the state. And I can tell you that if Trump is the one saying, I just want the killing in Russia to stop in Ukraine, none of the other guys have that clear of a message on the Republican or Democrat side. Maybe Robert Kennedy would. But that's a message called less people being murderously sacrificed. Jesus said, thou shalt not kill. God desires mercy, not sacrifice. I don't need to explain this. The one who is going to kill less people is the one that would be a Christian pragmatic vote. Now you could go and say, well, if you're voting for that guy and he's going to go off and kill somebody, are you not guilty of it? And I understand that. I've made that argument too. But at the end of the day, I think it's voting. If you're going to pragmatically vote, you're voting with or even if you don't vote, if you just want to support somebody or prefer someone was in office, I think I used to be more hardcore against it, but I've learned after COVID when I saw them murder
absolutely
family members and stuff in cold blood, I realized, holy shnikes, I could be absolutist about this because, ex candidate, still putting somebody away for heroin, but this is an absolutely horrible bioweapon that's being used to like wipe off people. And Trump wasn't that good on that, but he certainly wasn't as bad as Biden. He needs to repent of what he did,
baby. Light speed.
He needs to repent about what he did with that horrible product and some of the things that he went along with as a fool. He needs to have the humility at some point to pivot in a way he could even do it in the Trump style way. Fauci lied, because Mike Pence was in charge of the vaccine task force. He can just dump it on them, say Mike Pence.
Now, how has he not done that already?
I know, right? He should have done that. But that would really help healing of, this. But look, Trump's not the answer. All I'm saying is that's a rear guard side thing you do. So you see what I mean? Like, I want my cold fusion, that's room temperature nuclear energy.
Yep.
I want my elemental transmutation. I want my anti-gravity car. And I don't really care about the Trump thing, but I would want him in there rather than a Biden freak. I mean, I don't.
No politician's the answer.
If more friends of mine can get out of prison when Trump's back in, then I'm doing the Lord's work. One more soul, not in a rape cage that shouldn't be there. If Trump stops the war, that's kids not being killed. If he's going to repeal some of this global warming stuff that's starving people, making Ireland kill 100,000 cows, what the hell is this? If he helps stop some of that, that's pro-life. If he's pro-life on the abortion thing. So I want the most pro-life person in that wicked pagan system of government possible. And that means the whole life, not just
Speaking
the
of pro-life, isn't it interesting how so many Republicans could outlaw abortion and it never seems to happen?
Yeah.
Now,
yeah, and
like even Florida, like they would have the votes to make it completely legal, I think. And nope.
It's weird.
And I was disappointed with Ron DeSantis when he's tried to be mushy on foreign policy with Ukraine and stuff. I think that's a sign that he caved into the crowd in the wrong way.
They got this.
He should have been bold. He should have said, "I don't think Russians or Ukrainians should be killed. Not one person. Be humanitarian." Isn't it sad? Trump is the guy that's most barbarian in terms of our discourse, allegedly, but he's actually the most humanitarian of all the little puppets. He's a puppet, but he's the most humanitarian avatar we've had, because he actually says, I don't want the killing to go on. I remember him saying in some of his speeches when he was president, he would say, the hardest part of my job is when I have to come back, when somebody comes back in a body bag, in a coffin from overseas, the soldiers. And he said, he would say it in he would go 30 minutes at his rallies about this. He would say, you sit there and everybody is, hi, Mr. President. Hello, Mr. President. And the mother and the father are there, and everybody's just they've got it together. But as soon as that helicopter or the plane opens up the gate and you see the casket draped in the flag, they lose it. They just utterly lose it. And the crying and the screams you hear, I can't tell you, it's the worst thing. And I'm thinking to myself, that's actually a real human being there. Because he's saying and then he would say, that's why we have to stop these stupid wars.
Trump has the same problem, right? that you describe between the left and the right. Like the avatar of Trump, like he's more humanitarian in his actions, but like when you see him and the way he talks and stuff like that, you see more of a tyrant, sort of like over macho, over boys kind of.
But that's actually God's grace, right? Because, and I've said this to friends of mine, right? There's people on the right that I have these dialogues with, and some of it's behind the scenes. And I'm telling you, a lot of these people want authoritarian, we need to have blasphemy laws. We need to ban blasphemy and tuck and tough and all this stuff. And I'm like, you're a little shrimp looking fella and you're talking a big game, about you're going to ban all this stuff. There's a little, that whole saying like theology is biography, here.
Well, that's what the shrimps usually end up doing though. They identify with the strong man. It's the same thing of like a very oppressed person is going to identify with a tyrant because they're oppressed. The more oppressed the culture is, the more inclined they will to be to a tyrant figure because of their oppression. Right. They can't live out
just like dominance, just like not live out dominance in their own life. So
that's why it's God's grace. I think it's God's grace that Trump. I think it's God's. I'm gonna tell you this. I really think this. Because I'm not saying that Trump is the guy or whatever. I'm just saying God works on all of our stupid mistakes. He doesn't want us to have. It's important
to see the truth from like the persona, like you brought up. The left, like they seem to be altruistic within the things they do. They care about the environment. They care about people's rights. The little guy, the guy that's getting picked on, don't bully the LGBTQ. Like they're a very small demographic, yet let's give them all the attention. Let's show this sort of altruism within our time and our resources. And then you have the contrast to the left or the right, who's conservative, who's just like you said, I believe in God, and let's just keep burning oil and let's keep costs down and let's. Basically people aren't seeing, they're not using, and that's why I like the red pill analogy for truth and the way that we're supposed to, as Christians, look for truth and be disciples of truth. And when we talk about the Great Commission being the order of what Christ has asked us to do in agency, as what does it mean to live in agency as a part of the body of Christ. So define your part within that body of Christ. Find out what you are. Don't identify with your pastor or the mouthpiece or the pretty eyes or whatever's getting the attention. Find out what you are, your precise cellular place within that body of Christ, and own it and really be a proponent of that agency, whether that's the pancreas or whatever cell in the body that you are. Find that communion and become a part of that, and then start getting involved. And that's the church's business, is to get involved within that co-creation of heaven on earth.
Yeah,
which is the great agent, which is the Great Commission, and the like you were saying, this is the incarnate Christ. This is the incarnate Christ, that metaphysical becoming physical, and making that exciting for people to do. Is what I think is what the church is missing a lot of.
You don't even have to say metaphysical. I mean, you could, but you could just say, look, all we're saying is this guy did this in history. He healed people. He met them where their scarcity needs were. You have health afflictions are a type of scarcity, right? And same with, like, he helped his people say Jesus wouldn't use technology. I'm like, he got in a boat. He didn't swim. He got in a boat to move around the Galilee. He didn't swim laps around the entire Sea of Galilee. So he used technology to do efficient things. He told them, throw your nets there, and they got more fish than they could handle. So he obviously has this kind of technological thrust that he's patterning for us. So when we say mimetically, it's just a fancy word that just means imitate him. Don't sit in the boat like Peter and these people or other people and just like stay in the boat and say, man, you thank you for saving me. You're walking on water. I could never do that. You're the man, doing this. Oh man, you're the man. That's how Christians do. Instead, you need to get out of the boat and walk on water like him, but they're afraid to do that because that's dangerous, right? You could drown, you could look at the water and drown and so forth. Mm-hmm. And so when I say, hey, let's do anti-gravity, don't look at the water, do it. So you're looking at the water. Oh my God, that's stupid. They can't do that. All we can have is gasoline from Saudi Arabia. That's the best we can hope for. We've reached the end of history. Okay, now you're looking at the water. Now you're going to drown. And you're going to be stuck drowning in petroleum and stupidity, and you're going to be in debt.
I think one day they're going to look back on history to the way that this world has been running with the like big pharma or the drugs or the way that we use energy, and they're going to be like, those were major crimes against humanity. They had technology. Yeah. These people actually are responsible for massive genocide and loss of life. They're going to look back and be like, how unbelievable how much life has been lost because of the greed, because of the war between good and evil. But I really do believe it's going to be there will be a judgment day for the crimes against humanity that's been held for what the massive amount of life that's been lost with the technology and the means that we have today to save people's lives, to give energy, that's right, and to save people's lives. That's what point of being a Christian is. That's what our point is to do.
Exactly. It's like, and then so you say, okay, well, you say, so let's break this down. I want to break this down a little more. Let's go into this. Let's really get into it. So,
all right, we got 10 minutes. So let's nail this.
So you have people though who are saying, you know, like, what does this have to do with me? You said, like, let's create radical energy so that's so cheap we can all afford endless energy for our cars and homes and heating and everything, right?
Right.
What's that got? They freeze up and they say, what's that got to do with me and all my dysfunctional things? Well, you can spell it out in different ways. Well, it's part of your bills. It's why you can't afford a home. It's why you can't afford your car payment. It's why you're in debt. It's why you're miserable. But then you can step back and you say, okay, well, why do these things have so much power over us? Right now, we have a culture of people who believe that God isn't real, that Christ is not king, and that the state is. And the state is the king, and therefore we're going to emulate what the state tells us to do, which is to be me, because that's what every tyrant tells you. Follow your bliss so they can ensnare you. So when you look around at your family and you say, man, it's so hard. I'm inundated with all, you know, our family is inundated with all these bad role models telling us to go do this, follow your bliss, do that. So that like the day-to-day grind of your life and all the dysfunctions you have, whether you're single or whatever, that hellscape you feel is all a matrix that's built on this disbelief in Christ that I'm trying to get you to believe
hopelessness in. Being demoralized. Exactly.
When you believe in this and you truly believe in the implications of what I'm saying, don't believe in the fake version of Jesus where they tell you he's only there to cleanse you of your personal guilt and that's it. That's one small thing of what the cross was about. And if you're not told the full story of the gospel, you're not getting told the gospel, unfortunately. But God's still gracious and he's works through false people. He still works through it. But the point is like how much more so effective could we be if this type of gospel that I'm telling you today, which I believe is the gospel, could actually permeate every church in America right now? What could we do? Just not even every, just take 10%. If 10% of the pulpits were on fire with the effusive incarnational Christianity I'm talking about, which is not afraid, well, I don't want to talk about this alternative cure for cancer because we do have that guy as a deacon who's a prominent guy who owns a pharmaceutical or Walgreens in town, and we don't want to tick him off because he's on the deacon board. He's a big tithe, and I'm not going to say anything about that. I'm a pat. No, come on, that's not Christian. Get out.
Got no balls.
Find the Christians and let those be the pastors for now, and let the incarnational Christians and all of us. We have to work this out together. And here's the exciting thing. Here's what I'm convinced of. If we can do a few breakthroughs like signs and wonders, I talk about this a lot on shows, the signs and wonders, when we can do a few of those signs and wonders, the world, the culture is going to look at us and they're going to say, wow, Christianity is not the place for dumb people. It's the place for the smartest, coolest people on the block. They make the best movies, they raise the best families, and they're creating the most disruptive scientific wonders that are healing my grandma and making my pocketbook more abundant and making me afford a home without debt. I want more of that. And when that happens, what you'll see is the memes and everything and the role models and the water cooler conversations will be more edifying. And that's when you're going through hard things, you'll have more support. It won't just be this little dregs of a few people who have enough common, Christianity to really be in the trenches for you. We don't have to accept this mindset that we're in. Like even Christian conservatives are bowing to the lie of feminism, even though they think they're not. They're deeply feminist, the ones who think super feminist. And it's like, the only reason why Andrew Tate exists is because you don't have the guts to tell the truth about masculinity as Christ exemplifies it. He's just a symptom of your failure to have enough guts to say the truth and to say it with love and joy and confidence and not worry about where the chips fall after that. And that's what I'm just saying. It's like, all these things I'm talking about, when I talk about anti-gravity, don't sit there and think that I'm a carnival character who's trying to get you excited like Alex Jones or some gimmick and like, oh, that was entertaining, and then go back to your video game. Like, stop. What if I could tell you, get off the video game and help Crazy Bill with this microwave, and you're going to produce gold tonight? Would you like to see gold come from nothing, from trash tonight? Or do you want to level up with fake gold on your Xbox? I think you would probably want to do more of the gold experiment if someone said, hey, come with me. You know what that feels like? It feels like the movie Back to the Future. That reminds me of the culture we used to love when we were kids. That culture where we still believed that great marvels of science were
man.
hidden
You
in
had
the
hope,
valleys.
dude.
Yeah,
and that's what we can have again. It's there, but we just need to like push through it and not talk about it, and not just talk about it, but then like work together. I want to have conferences that do what we're doing and work it out. I want to have engineers on stage doing demonstrations of what they're working on and having it tested by other scientists. Whether they're PhDs,
and I think people need to know that you
know?
don't have to understand the science to enjoy it. You don't have to understand the science to celebrate it, to celebrate your brothers who do have an understanding of that, moving the ship forward. And that's why we're doing it. And that's a beautiful, so well said, David. Thank you so much, Big David G. And I want to tell you, that's what we're trying to do here with the Iron Disciples. And I know that's what you're doing there, because to get these guys in the church is going to start with good men being good husbands and good fathers. And they got to take initiative. And this is why it's an online thing right now. And hopefully that percolates and grows and ebbs out. And people, the hope, the feeling that we can have during these conversations is real. That is a taste of that fruit of the garden of the past. This is our spiritual nourishment. And I don't want to just play church. None of these young men want to play church and continue reliving the same old script that's been said. So we're refreshed by you, David, brother.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for
let's
giving us.
Let's put a workshop of young men together. I'll come over there. We'll bring some crazy scientists with us if we can. Let's workshop this out. Let's teach young men how to do mimetic body language. So when you're doing a body language posture, is that inciting aggression in your partner? Are you creating scandal when you're not intending to? How to alleviate with ninja Aikido moves socially to de-escalate conflict in your life. And
this is the practical stuff. This is the practical stuff they need, because I'm going to tell you, they're getting a lot of abstract stuff, and this is the practical things that they need. Joe and I have been stumbling through the mimetic things since we got you on it. We've been trying to educate ourselves, dropping little half-baked seed pockets here and there in the podcast, and people kind of like, what the hell are these guys talking about? But eventually this is going to grow, and that's how we defend ourselves, is becoming more mimetically inclined towards Christ. And like you said, the smell of hope, the aromas of hope, the flavors of hope coming from Christ, there's nothing better than that.
Yeah,
and it's going to change. Yep, everybody wants it. So let's schedule that. We're serious about it. And you can teach us, man. Like, we'd love to learn from you and be edified.
I like, and maybe it's crazy, but I like trying to integrate like really super practical things. Like we could even demonstrate in front of people, like how mimetic insults work. Like, I come to reach out, shake your hand, and you pull back because you didn't like what I said, and I reciprocate that. We can work that through. I wish, and I think I might have told you this before, I wish that middle schoolers and stuff were taught this.
Absolutely.
So that they know like how to be superheroes in middle school. Like, because that's like matrix level knowledge. That's like that bullet time thing. Like, if you're a middle schooler and you know mimetic theory like viscerally well, and then you see all these little fads in your school, and
you're emotionally stable. You're emotionally stable. Your anxiety is gone. I mean, like, it's the biggest.
Yeah, and then if you learn to like, and if you're a middle schooler, that's when you're kind of becoming of age and stuff. It's like if you could like learn mimetic theory and learn how to like apply that, so that you're not just like, well, everybody's a jock, so I'm going to be a punk rock. Okay, that's that mimetic reverse mirror I was talking about. So teaching kids, like, don't do that. I mean, don't just like hide your mimesis by watching your neighbor and then just doing the opposite. Like, learn. Okay, if you go into a classroom, this kid's messing with you and he's saying this, like, learn how to ninja Aikido that without, and these things are not hard in theory, but they are hard in practice. But if you don't have a map, right, then you don't have anywhere to go. And then you're just twiddling
most people
thumbs.
They understand it, but it's like they don't have a nomenclature for it. They don't they can't
codify
see, they haven't seen like the elements and identified each one of them. So like, I would love to, like, this podcast, you really kind of like scratch the surface of like what's going on, these issues, the politics, these just how do we handle them, or how do we handle them at all? And then now we need to have the agency within what's our tools, what is mimetic theory. Let's get into what mimetic theory. Let's go in through all the examples so that we can give these guys these tools so that it's something they understand, like you were saying. Let's give them that.
And some kids, some people are going to like mythology, and that's there. You can do the high concept stuff too. It works nice and fluid, with the practical day-to-day stuff.
Well, we want them to get into that. We do. I mean, you want them to start getting a flavor for that kind of stuff, because ultimately
the hermeneutic. Like in our Bible studies, we teach hermeneutic. We try and, you know, peel. There's guys falling asleep sometimes, but I'm like, you know, if they get enough of this, they're going to start to desire the flavor. It's like in an Italian family, you start serving some broccolini. When you're a kid, you're like, this stuff is gross. By the time you're 17, you're like, give me an extra serving of broccolini. But
so with that said, I see you guys as you guys could be the Mr. Rogers for Generation Alpha. That's the young kids being born now. You guys should be preparing yourself. I mean, you're working with Generation Z and everything, but Generation Alpha is this new generation. They're little kids right now. They're, you know, be thinking about practicing with millennials and Gen Z. Be thinking about your teaching methods, adapting it to a young age. Adapt so you're that older brother figure that, you know, is guiding Generation Alpha that's got a blank slate. Their slate hasn't been predetermined yet. They're still, you know, toddlers and elementary. Soon they'll be middle school. But if you're reactionary,
that's awesome.
If you're reactionary, you're always thinking about chasing. Well, we still got to figure out the millennials, or we got to figure out Z. It's like, no, think ahead. You know you're not going to get your educational method down right tomorrow. Start working it out now in real time with Generation Z. But have your agenda be towards to be able to get it perfect for Alpha's perspective on the world and to be their Mr. Rogers, so to speak, on your podcast to like equip them to be like thriving in this world.
And I want to reiterate something you said at the last, and I'll be the last thing I say before we close it down. But these changes, don't be I think you told it in so many words. Don't be disheartened by slower change, you know, and just keep at it, keep doing it. If you're like the one guy in your church, keep going at it, and then connect with us, because like it is the alpha gen. It's the kids. It's being able to integrate this stuff early that's going to have the ripple effect go the furthest distance. Because I'm not going to be able to convince an 11-year-old. I'm not going to be able to convince a 15-year-old, maybe. But those odds start to go down further, you know, as you have more of a disconnect with your generation. So I'd love to have you come down. We would love to have you come down. And for as a message to those guys who want to have impact, and maybe they're being demoralized by saying, hey, I've already been doing this in my church. Like, I love you guys. I love what you're saying. I've already been doing this in my church for 5-6 years. Yeah. Keep doing it, man. Keep doing it. Don't be demoralized. Don't feel like crap. Don't do Satan's job for him. You know, have that hope, and that hope is on a everlasting tap. God is the spring that he's inexhaustible. So even though it might not seem like the world is changing that quickly, and, you know, things are going straight to hell, keep the hope, guys. Do not become demoralized.
And remember that Apple commercial everybody loves where it says, here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the contrarians, the ones that don't think right. And that's like such an Americana ad. Everybody loves that ad, right? But that famous ad is tapping into what we're talking about, and that's what I'm saying. Like the Christian message that we're talking about, if you just live it out and own it, is the most exciting thing, because it's the one that Apple is pulling from when they say, here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the inventors, the ones who don't sit right, the ones that don't think straight, the ones that are, you know, off kilter. Every American wants to like rally to that, because that's the American underdog story. And that underdog story comes from Christ. So lean into it, you know, lean into it. Don't run away from the underdog story, own it, and then push it forward, you know, and own it. Don't be a victim, but own it.
Absolutely. Let's continue these conversations, brother David. I love them. They're my favorite podcasts. And let's try to do this more often, man.
Yeah, man. David, where can the audience find you?
neighborschoice.com, and search my name for David Gornoski for whatever podcast you're on, you know, whatever podcast platform you like.
Yeah, awesome. Man, go check him out, man.
You guys' website linked in the description, so check them out.
Yeah. And thanks again, Dave, man. Thanks. It's been good hanging with you, bro.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks, man. Love it. You got to come down soon.
Let's do it.
Let's do this. Love you, brother.
Take care.